Hello and welcome to the Horror Screams podcast. This is our December 2020 episode. We are an extension of the Horror Screams Video Vault website. Do check it out when you get a chance. I'm your host, Stephen, and I'm joined, as ever, at this special time of year by our regular co-host, Sarah. How's it going, Sarah?
It's going very well, thank you. How's you?
Yeah, all right. Yeah.
Feeling Christmassy?
yeah, I'm covered in glitter as we speak. In
Nice,
fact,
that sounds like an everyday thing.
nothing else, but yeah, it's
just glitter.
And
a bit of tinsel, just because it's December.
Oh, that fell off again, actually. I better just pop that back on. Sellotape didn't quite stick there, which is a bit awkward.
And your baubles.
Yeah. Oh, blimey, had to mention those early on. Yeah.
It's Christmas.
It is Christmas, yeah. I mean, everything's fine. There's nothing to see in the bigger world. Everything's going to be all right.
Absolutely not. All families gathering together.
Yeah, in massive groups.
Yeah.
All packing in the churches and the village halls, bingos and all that stuff.
Just like normal.
Yeah. We're recording this on the 19th of December and it goes live on Christmas Day.
Yes, Christmas Day. So you can listen to us while you sleeping off your Christmas dinner.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this could be the highlight of Christmas 2020, which is pretty disturbing that it's come to this and we're the highlight.
That's a scary, yeah.
But yeah, we're all alive, which is good. And yeah, the good thing is, I mean, you may agree with this, but although we've both still been working, it has been a year where, because of not much else going on, we've had a chance to watch more movies than usual. I think certainly me. I've not had a commute to work, which normally takes up quite a lot of time, so that makes a difference. And I think people generally have probably been able to indulge a bit more in the old home viewing. So that will probably be reflected when we come to our top 10s, because this episode is the end of year episode where we roll out our countdown of our favourite horror movies of the year. And we've whittled them down to 10 each with some honourable mentions, but we'll be coming to that later.
Uh-huh.
We'll also, which is always exciting, actually. I love top 10s of stuff generally, actually.
Yeah.
Charts and lists. I like lists. I'm such a geek with lists. Did you ever used to read the Guinness Book of World Records? I used to get that at Christmas when I was little.
Yeah. Yep. That's where you get it from.
I think so, because it's full of useless stuff, isn't it? Like, most baked beans eaten in one sitting by a Turkish man wearing a fez. And I'm reading a book at the same time, or something ridiculous like that, or most turnips juggled in an hour.
Stuff that you really need to know.
Important stuff, yeah. Really addictive, though. And once you get that stuff in your head, you
start doing your own lists.
Yes, and you try and beat them. It's just fantastic. So we'll be doing that. We've also got, as a special Christmas treat, our main feature before the top 10s will be the Silent Night, Deadly Night films, in particular parts 1 and 2. Which are great companion pieces before the series kind of tails off a little bit. So we'll be focusing on those with a bit of a mention of the others. But first, it's the recently seen portion of the show where we'll just have a little chat about stuff that we've caught up with in the 4 weeks or so since our The Thing podcast. So, Sarah, why don't you start us off and tell us something that you've recently indulged in?
Oh, right. Well, my first recently seen one is a recommendation from you and Matt of the last podcast, of the Thing podcast, and you had both watched Colour Out of Space.
Oh.
And you said that I had to watch it straight away, so I pretty much went and watched it the night after.
Excellent.
And yeah, it was really, really good. I love a bit of Nicolas Cage, although he was a bit like Donald Trump at times, I thought. Just his voice, the way he spoke, sometimes I was like, is he trying to be Donald Trump? But no, it was brilliant movie. Really enjoyed it. So thank you very much for the recommendation. Okay. Everyone else should watch it as well.
They really should. Isn't it beautiful as well? The colours, the purples and pinks. Really, really beautiful. Yeah, Nicolas Cage does have that very strange cadence to his voice anyway, but yeah, maybe in this one.
Yeah, I think I really picked up on it this year.
Yeah. He's totally bonkers.
He is totally bonkers. I still think he's the most bonkers I've ever seen Nicolas Cage was Mum and Dad. That was brilliant.
I love Mum and Dad. He starts smashing up stuff a lot, doesn't he?
Yeah.
It's such a great film.
Really crazy. And then obviously he's kind of renowned for it most of the time, isn't he? And then he was crazy in Mandy, but I think he's about the same level as he is in Mandy in Colour of Space, isn't he? And it was pretty, it was very similar to the Thing, because you have the whole thing with the alpacas going on and the morphing of the mother and the son, and yeah, it was really good, very Thing-like.
Massively so, yeah, with the great practical effects. They're really good, aren't they? And we don't get, maybe it seems even more special now because we don't get that many films. Maybe this year I've seen more low budget stuff that's had some good practical stuff, but we don't get enough bigger films that have practical gore effects without any CGI. I guess there was CGI in this, but
yeah,
just enough to kind of touch up appropriately certain other effects. Yeah, I really liked it. I like Richard Stanley a lot. He's a really interesting guy. He's when he was doing the Colour of Space, or even Colour Out of Space promo circuit, he was popping up on loads of podcasts, pretty much telling the same stories of living up a mountain for 10 years with his cat.
Cool.
And the awful story of working in Hollywood for the island of Dr. Moreau when he got sacked and then crept back up on the set under heavy makeup so they didn't realise. It's just he's working with Val Kilmer, who was such an arsehole, apparently. So he's a really fun guy to listen to, and he's had a mad career. But I'm really pleased that he's back with this, and I think it's done well. So I'm hoping that he's going to make some more for... it's done by Elijah Wood's company. I think it's Spectrovision, who made Mandy and made some other stuff. Really good production company. So yeah, I really loved Colour Out of Space. That was awesome. Glad you saw it. At our instructions.
Yes, absolutely. Always up for recommendations and stuff. So yeah, very much appreciated. That was great. Nice.
On a less awesome note, but on a festive note, this week I saw Black Christmas. Which you'd think would be a cause for celebration, but I watched the 2019 version of Black Christmas.
Ooh.
Now,
and?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
So Black Christmas, of course, is a really creepy 70s horror movie, which was hugely responsible for starting the slasher genre in a lot of ways. Carpenter never hid the fact that Black Christmas was an influence on Halloween. And actually, I quite like the 2006 remake, which was by the Final Destination guys and doesn't take itself that seriously. He's extremely gory, a bit silly, but I quite like that one. This one, this one's from Blumhouse, who do have that great business model, I think, of making horror films, and budgets are never any more than 5 million, and they've made great things like Get Out. They've done quite a lot of teen horrors. I actually quite liked Happy Death Day to You, which had an awful trailer, but the films are actually quite witty. Black Christmas isn't really a remake. I mean, it's got, to a degree, it's got slasher elements. A bunch of students are being picked off at this privileged college. It's got a twist, which means it's not really a slasher film. And if you don't really want to know what the twist is, or if you can't be bothered with the film, just watch the trailer and you'll see the twist. And in fact, you'll see the ending, pretty much.
Oh, there we go.
But worst of all, I think, for a while I was thinking, this is all right. It's snowy. I quite like horror films in the snow. Then you realise it's PG-13, so all the killings are off camera. Then you realise it's trying to be a film of today. So it's a movie that's massively self-indulgent, and it proves that, if you try to make a film that's socially relevant and try too hard, you end up with something like Black Christmas, which commendably is written and directed by women, but with such a heavy hand. It's got all the male characters literally say things like, "You bitches are all the same," just in case we don't get the theme of the film is about oppression. It's got a really heavy-handed date rape backstory for the main character, and just the worst possible, the most annoying revelation at the end. Again, the twist is pretty much in the trailer, with Carrie Elwes, who's normally quite fun, playing this smug kind of plummy teacher. It's just painful. It's just such a patronizing, I think, attempt to kind of be relevant with the times and talk about really important issues, no doubt about it, but don't patronize us by pretending to be a horror film and not even try to be scary and kind of lay this on with a trowel, when movies like Get Out have dealt with serious issues but made them fun and entertaining at the same time. So this attempt at commenting on misogyny also forgets as well that horror for a long time has had strong female characters, and the genre doesn't really need someone to spoon feed this to us. Especially in a PG-13 horror film that forgets to be a horror film and is actually really boring.
Oh, no. Well, let's hope they don't attempt to do that one again, then.
Yeah.
As it's been done now twice.
Twice. A classic example, I guess, of using a well-known name, coming up with something vaguely connected to the other ones and calling it Black Christmas. And turns out, though, nobody went to see it. Nobody should like it. Yep.
And nobody else needs to watch it now.
You don't need to watch it.
No.
Yeah, you don't need to watch it. That's why we're here, folks, just to, time is precious and all that.
Yeah.
What else have you seen, Sarah?
Oh, well, I have finally seen Train to Busan presents Peninsula.
Jawohl.
It came out 30th of November, I believe, on DVD, and I pre-ordered it. And I know loads of people have probably seen it months and months ago, and I heard so much about it. Not necessarily great things, but I was like, I have to watch this. I have to watch this. As soon as it arrived, straight in, watched it, and I actually really enjoyed it. I would agree with most people saying that it's definitely not Train to Busan, but it's not trying to be Train to Busan. I don't know why people think it would be.
Sure.
It's set about 4 years after the first one was set, and the characters in this are I think they were a lot nicer than they were in the first one, because you don't like the main guy in the first Train to Busan to start off with, do you? You're not meant to like him. He's not a friendly person. It's just like, as the film goes on towards the end, you warm to him. These characters, you kind of understand straight away, and you get them. It has a lot of zombie action, which is really cool. And as usual, the Koreans do zombies really, really well. It goes a little bit over the top with the CGI green screen at times. It kind of makes your eyes go a bit weird. But it has some great funny little humorous twists to it and stuff. There's a bit where there's a group of people that have survived and been left on the island that have kind of made their own community, and it kind of feels a little bit kind of Land of the Dead, Day of the Dead thing kind of going on. There's a little bit of an undertone there, which I appreciated. It's just another really good movie, and I'm glad I finally got to see it.
Yeah, it's cool. These movies, I think, are doing superbly well, aren't they? At least I think worldwide they're doing well, but I'm pretty sure in South Korea these are like massive blockbusters. There was the spin-off, or it's more of a prequel, isn't it? Seoul Station, the animation.
Seoul Station, yeah.
Which I thought was really good. I have to say, I was a huge fan of Train to Busan, and it's one of those things where I've only seen it once, but the experience of seeing it once was at a festival, and it was so good because there was a sense that everybody was really into it, and it was a closing night film, so I think there was a great relief that they have done it in the past. This was Fright Fest. They have done it in the past where they've ended on a bit of a kind of, okay then, see you next year. But this time it had the right amount of action. Yeah, I thought it was really good.
It's a good one to end on. I do need to watch it again because it's been a long time since I watched it. But I think now I've got the trilogy. That'll be a good one to dig out on a quiet day. Yeah,
I quite liked Peninsula. I have to say I much preferred Train to Busan. That's just me. This one, it did have that kind of vibe. It had a Mad Max kind of vibe at times as well. I did like some of the characters. There was some good kind of eccentric new characters that really seemed to fit the bill in this weird post-apocalyptic world that it was set in. It's a lot of South Korean cinema is extremely well done. I mean, it's admittedly, like you said, there's a bit of CGI in here where it becomes a bit video gamey, but the craft of a lot of these films, on what I can only guess is relatively small budgets, is pretty impressive, really. So, I think it's had mixed response. Would you say generally?
Yeah, definitely. I'd definitely say so. Quite a lot of hardcore zombie people on various groups and stuff are just kind of. I don't know if they're necessarily jumping on the back bandwagon and literally just kind of slagging it off for slagging it off's sake, but it doesn't seem to have gone down all that well in the hardcore groups.
Yeah, it's got a hard act to follow, but I think it's better than what some reviews have suggested for sure. It's always tricky following something like that, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. But I think they did pretty well.
Yeah, Peninsula is it's available now on streaming and Blu-ray and the like. I watched something. The next one is something that I know we both watched, which is another Shudder joint. And Shudder, of course, have been pulling out all the stops this year, really, it seems at least. And it was Anything for Jackson.
Oh, yes.
Which is this quite nice little movie. I think it's Canadian from? I may have just made that up. Yes. Oh, cool. And the thing I like most about this, and I have some reservations about this, but the thing I like most is the couple at the centre of it, which is this aging couple. And you actually end up quite liking them, really. They've been through a lot. They're desperate to bring back Jackson, who is their grandson who died awfully. And they'll go to any lengths, including, in this case, a very elaborate ritual involving the kidnapping of this patient of the dad, or of the man, rather, who is a respected doctor. There's a quite nice opening shot, which I think is all one long take, where it introduces them in this fairly boring conversation about his trousers, I think. Isn't it? About the hem.
The hem on his trousers, yeah.
Which I like. There's a streak of humour running through this I did really like. And that's a great opener, because you kind of sit through this thinking, oh, yeah, okay, this is the biggest crisis in their life. Then you gradually realise that, oh God, they're involved in some dark stuff. And there's some other good jokes in it, like the kind of occult expert who listens to heavy metal and gets nagged by his mum, and things like that.
He's really creepy, and his little box of dead mice.
Yeah. And it has some fun deaths, and the premise is really great. I just think I don't know, maybe it was just me, but I thought it ran out of steam a bit when it should have been building something monumental and massive, but it's still fun, and I'd say it's a recommend.
Yeah, absolutely. The ghosts and stuff that visited them were the creepy guy that can like bend himself backwards and stuff with the plastic bag on his head. There is some actually quite scary ghosts in that. That was quite alarming.
Yeah, there's some great visuals, isn't it? Which are quite surprising and quite disturbing. Just when you think it's settled into more of a black comedy thing, then it does have some proper scares. Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah. Anything for Jackson is on Shudder, along with a whole heap of other stuff. So I'd say Shudder is always worth subscribing to for at least a while and catch a whole bunch of things as you do so. What's your next one, Sarah?
My next one is one that I got sent to review. I'm a little bit behind on it because it's a 2018 film, but it absolutely blew me away. And I think it's one that you've seen as well. It's a Russian movie called Why Don't You Just Die?
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Oh, mate, I was just like, this is the best thing ever. I absolutely loved it to bits. It was brilliant. It was funny. It was gory. It had so many twists and stuff to it that you just didn't expect, and the way everything was shot, it was just fantastic.
It's so good, isn't it?
So good.
Yeah, this was. I watched this. I think I watched this in our first lockdown. I'm sure I did. And it was really cool. And it's a time when you were sort of a little bit concerned about things. You thought, I hope this one's fun. And it really is. It's really brutal. There's points where you go, God. And it's also massively stylish. It reminded me a lot of a few things. It's got a Tarantino vibe at times.
Lots of people mention that, yeah.
Yeah, it's got a real Edgar Wright vibe with all the stylish stuff, the rewinds, whip pans, freeze frames, all that stuff, the flashbacks, the mad style that just keeps the pace really dynamic.
Yeah.
But it's also got a fantastic bunch of actors, hasn't it? The guy that plays the awful wife beater, the horrible thuggish guy that's always munching on sausages, and it's just an awful human being.
And the boyfriend, you just love him straight away. He's just so sweet. And
absolutely,
he gets the absolute shit beaten out of him, doesn't he? Bless him.
Yes, yeah. It's a surprising film, isn't it? Because you, again, maybe a bit like Anything for Jackson, but I thought this one was, one of the best. Just when you think you kind of know the tone, then it surprises you by the character of the wife. I remember you really feel for, and she's in the background so much, but gradually the movie becomes much more about her, and what happens along the way is actually shocking, but not in a crowd pleasing rah 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 way. It's more like, oh God, okay.
Yeah, it actually kind of brings it all down, whereas there's been violence throughout. What actually happens to her actually makes you stop and kind of take a step back and just be like, whoa, there's a lot of wince-inducing stuff that's making you just kind of just go, you can actually feel it. But when that happens to her, or she does what she does, you're just it takes you back. It's great. It's just so well done.
It really is. And I think maybe it fits into the category of what I always thought with films like this. And there's quite a lot of films like this which are very arch and showy and kind of self-conscious, I guess, about it. But I think if everything is funny, then it doesn't usually work. Like Shaun of the Dead is a great example of that, maybe the best I could think of, where they could have made Shaun of the Dead where everything is funny, but when everything's funny, there's no stakes. So the fact that Sean's lovely mum gets infected and there's this awful tragedy of her fate, for example, and the fact that you root for Sean, of course, as well, gives that movie such dramatic weight, as well as it being really funny all the way through. There is a lot at stake. It's not just a laugh. And I think Why Don't You Just Die is another example of that. It could have just been this, relentless violence where you're cringing, but you're laughing as well. But then elements of it make you think, wow, okay, I'm really rooting for him and her life is awful. And it's got everything. It's fantastic. It really is. Arrow released it over here. It's a Russian film, which I think dates back a year or two, but this was its UK release this year. So
okay, I was then thinking I was just really behind on everyone else, and everyone else has probably watched it, and they're like, "Oh yes, Sarah, we already know this. We know it's amazing. Stop going on about it." If you haven't, if you're about as behind as I am, go watch it now.
Well, I think it's a strange thing, isn't it? There's such a glut of films. Our films are just coming out of every orifice. And even though we've got 78 different streaming services, a lot of films still take, international films especially, like in this case a Russian film, still take a long while to actually reach us even nowadays. So picking up distribution and all that kind of thing is still tough. And I guess Arrow picked it up this year, and here it is. But yeah, you owe it to yourself to check out Why Don't You Just Die. I can't imagine anyone being disappointed by that.
No, definitely not. There's something for everyone.
It is. It's a great Christmas watch.
Yeah.
It's so good. Sam Raimi, that's the other thing. It reminds me of early Sam Raimi as well. Mental Sam Raimi. Cool. Another thing on Shudder, on the Shudder podcast that obviously we've become, which I watched. We're not affiliated in any way with Shudder. And
not yet.
We will sometimes moan about them. It's a film called Body, which is a little film which I really liked, and it's a festive film. It's set on Christmas Eve. I just thought this was a nice example of a film that's like an hour and 10 minutes long. It's got a simple concept. It's got really likable characters, unlike Black Christmas, and it's quite witty and quite funny, unlike Black Christmas, and it's just really suspenseful as well. And I suppose it's got a very good link to the slasher genre in the sense of it's about three teenagers who are smoking weed and things like that on Christmas Eve. And they have a cracking idea to generate some excitement rather than hang around with a boring family, to head over to one of the girl's uncle's empty mansion. He goes away and leaves it empty. So they go over there to smoke some more weed. But they end up basically encountering an oldish man played by Larry Fessenden, who is the director who often turns up as an actor in different low-budget horror films, and it's really good. Something happens to him quite early on, and then they have to make some tough decisions, and it involves a slasher movie style cover-up of something that would otherwise get them arrested in a whole heap of trouble. And the rest of the movie is about this escalating thing. They made a terrible mistake, not really through a fault of their own. It was something that just happened by chance. They made the wrong decision, and now it's getting worse and worse, and lives are at stake. It's really good. It's all about that kind of self-preservation of human beings in a dire situation, but it's got three girls that you really root for, and it's not particularly gory, and it's very short, but it's just really good all the way through. So Body is a nice one for an easy watch, I think, but just a good old-fashioned suspense movie.
Oh, cool. I'm yet to check that one out, so I will. That's going on this week's homework.
Yeah, and it won't take that much time either. So,
cool.
Yeah, nice. Everyone wins.
Yay.
What's next on your list?
My final one, as we said, we're not affiliated by Shudder, but once again, I'm going to mention something I watched on Shudder, and it is the Creepshow Holiday Special.
Excellent.
Which appeared just out of nowhere. I think I heard about it yesterday, and then you said it was on Prime straight away. So I was like, right, okay, I'm watching it now then. And it's only 45 minutes long. It's a humorous, light-hearted, good little bit of fun that you probably want to watch on Christmas Eve, I think. It's not too it's Christmassy, but it's not too Christmassy, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah.
They haven't gone along the lines of the way they went for the Halloween special. So it's not animated, it is acted. It has Adam Pally, and who else is in there? You have Anna Camp, both starring it as as kind of odd characters. Adam is Nick Weston, I believe his name is, and he's not sure if he's turning into a werewolf. So he goes to Shapeshifters Anonymous meeting, where he finds and meets other were people. I can't remember what name they called themselves.
Oh yeah, I've forgotten too. I did know it at one stage. It's a strange word. Yeah.
It sounded posh and intelligent, and I didn't write it down, so I can't remember what they called themselves. But yes, he joins a group of other were people, and they then discover that Santa Claus was created to kill all their folk and stuff. So they end up having a mass battle with Santa Claus and his Santa people. It's really good fun. It's good fun. There's a lot of practical effects. It's it's very Creepshow. It's very Greg Nicotero. It's very awesome.
It's really good. Yeah, this was my fourth thing as well. My fourth reason. Because in retrospect, I don't think I have watched a huge amount of horror lately. Maybe, I don't know. But yeah, it was really fun. Yeah, the Creepshow series, which we had earlier this year, was good fun. I thought this one, I didn't see the animated special for Halloween yet, but I thought this one actually was maybe a step up in terms of production values. It looked more expensive, but it looked more colourful. It looked more stylish. Maybe it's written and directed by Greg Nicotero, who obviously knows the drill. Yeah, it was great fun. Yeah, I like the idea of the Shapeshifters Anonymous meeting with such great shapeshifters as a guy that turns into a boar and one that turns into a tortoise. And
a were-tortoise.
A were-tortoise. And a woman that doesn't turn into anything but does wear a hippo costume.
Yeah, she's a fairy.
So that was cool. The premise was mental and fun. And yeah, the acting was really good. The hero, I thought, was really someone, again, to really root for. He made me laugh. Yeah. And the interaction between him and the weird cheetah lady was good fun as well. Plus, it has a whole boatload of references to loads of other werewolf films, like Ginger Snaps, Lon Chaney, John Landis. Was a character called Landis, I think. A nice reference, which you don't get enough in werewolf films, was to Waldemir Daninsky, the werewolf from the Paul Naschy films, the great Spanish werewolf actor, or monster movie actor rather. So that was nice. It had a real reverence for that. And I just miss werewolf films, really. Werewolf films have always been one of my favourite subgenres of horror, but you don't get enough good ones.
No, that's right. I mean, they didn't go through the hassle of trying to do like big changes or anything else. They kept it quite simple with the werewolf costume, didn't they? It did remind me of kind of like the older look of the werewolf without like the too much of an elongated nose and stuff like that. It's kind of more comical.
Yeah, sure. I'd really like a practical werewolf, and this gave us that. I have to say, I would have really liked an on-screen transformation. I mean, it did it kind of in shadow. Which I get, it's a cost-saving thing. It's an effective thing as well. But I guess I just miss, like, when you look back, you realise that, oh, wow, so in the 80s we had a whole bunch of great werewolf films like The Howling, American Werewolf, and Wolfen. And in the 2000s we've had the shit CGI ones from Underworld.
Yeah.
Oh, and Twilight. And
Twilight and
what's
True
the other
Blood.
terrible movie? Oh, is there a werewolf in Van Helsing? I think, is there a werewolf in that?
No, we have this argument every time. I love Van Helsing. It's brilliant.
Oh no. Oh,
I love the werewolf transformation in Van Helsing. Sorry, I do.
The awful did you hear the awful Wes Craven film Cursed?
No, I've not seen that.
Yeah, I always like to point people when they talk about Wes Craven being a master of horror. Usually, I mean, he deserves that title just for about 3 or 4 films, but he's the man that made Cursed and Vampire in Brooklyn and Swamp Thing. But Cursed especially is unforgivable. It's just so dreadful. It's just painful. It's got Skeet Ulrich in it. I think in one verse, it was one of those films that was so bad they reshot most of it, but it still turned out terrible.
Oh, no.
And they cut out the gore and they replaced Rick Baker's proper werewolf with a shit CGI one. It's not quite depressing now, actually. But yeah, the Creepshow Christmas special. Is it called anything except the Creepshow Christmas special?
No, the holiday special is what it's called. Yeah.
Holiday special. Yeah. That covers all bases. Yeah, it's really fun.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's not crap at all. Not like the CGI at all.
Yeah, great job. And do you know when the series 2 is coming out?
Next year is all I know. I did look that up earlier. It still just says 2021, so I couldn't tell you exactly when. I'm guessing they're working on it. I want them to do more animated stuff, but I will go on about that later.
Sure, yeah, do, yeah.
I feel like it might appear later.
You never know. Spoiling nothing. Yeah,
Nope.
It's great. If anything, I think the nice thing about watching this and the episodes earlier in the year is that it does capture the spirit of Creepshow, which was always a big hit around here in the 80s. The film and indeed the comic books of the 50s, the EC comic stuff is very much in the vein of that. They weren't too serious. They were gory, good fun. And check it out. Well, that was a good bunch of recently seen, I thought. Some recommendations there. No one will ever watch the new Black Christmas, which is good. Sorted that out. And all people involved should be ashamed. And we can move on happily to the seasonal spectacular of Silent Night, Deadly Night, which is this episode's Retro Rewind. So we've had some major classics recently, and this is not classic, but it's a real nice vintage title, especially for this time of the year. It came out in 1984, and essentially it came out at the point where a new studio, which was TriStar, were looking for their own slasher franchise, because Friday the 13th was still around, Nightmare on Elm Street was kind of arriving, and the film they made had a lot of controversy in America, thanks mainly, I think, to their decision to buy commercial time at Christmas during the daytime TV slots of football games and things like that. So a whole bunch of mums, probably about 6, got upset by it. Think of the children, the usual rubbish. Theatres were picketed. Idiot critics like Siskel and Ebert, threw it on the fire. There's a hilarious review from Leonard Maltin, who's a really famous American critic, who in his review, I think the review was 2 lines or something, but basically the review was, what next? The Easter Bunny is a child molester, which of course immediately somewhere in Hollywood's going, oh, wait a minute, there's something in there.
Hang on, that's the script
coming next Easter.
Yeah.
The quite tragic thing is the controversy worked in a sense, in the bad sense, because TriStar pulled the film from the theatres pretty quickly, even though it made a lot of money in a short amount of time. But in a good sense, because of course when anything like this happens, you've got a great selling point for the video release later on, the movie they tried to ban.
Yep.
But do check out some of the stuff from the time. I mean, the original trailer is great. And bear in mind that this was showing on daytime TV for kids to see. This gravelly voice saying, you've made it through Halloween, now try and survive Christmas, which is fantastic. And the silly joke of it all is that, of course, there was nothing new about an axe-wielding Santa, the famous EC comic story, and All Through the House had been adapted into a famous part of Tales from the Crypt in the 70s by Amicus, which was a big hit. So it's not like a bad Santa was anything new in horror. But, it was the time for that kind of controversy. So, Silent Night, Deadly Night is a fun one and slightly unusual one in its structure. Do you want to kind of set up the scene for us, Sarah, about how Silent Night, Deadly Night opens up?
Oh, okay. It opens up just as a normal happy family travelling on Christmas Eve to visit their grandfather, or the father of the dad who's driving the car. It's a couple and their young son. I think he's about 7, young Billy, and they've got baby Ricky in the car as well, driving off to visit Grandpa. He's really excited for Christmas, and he wants to know when Santa's delivering presents and if he can stay up and see him. And his parents tell him, Santa only comes when everyone's asleep. You've got to have been nice and good all year, and all the general kind of stuff that you tell to your kids. They then visit their grandpa. He's in a mental institution. Yeah. They take the young children to see grandpa in the mental institution
on Christmas Eve.
Yep. And grandpa just appears to be kind of like, he's just kind of spaced out, really. He doesn't really do anything. He's just staring into space, and the family are all standing around saying, well, we'll come and see him when he starts talking again or something like that. And then the doctor goes and has a word with the parents, and then obviously Grandpa then wakes up and has a quite scary conversation with Billy, saying that he had to not just be good like for the month or recently up until Christmas. You have to be good all year round, otherwise bad things are going to happen. And Billy looks really freaked out, and then all of a sudden the parents turn up and Grandpa's back to his like trance state again, so they don't actually believe Billy when he says, but he's really freaking out in the car on the way back. In the meantime, we see a man in a Santa costume raiding a shop. He holds up a guy and tries to rob the shop, shoots the guy in the head and walks off with $31 and just gets on his car really angry, drives off. And on the way back from the mental institution, the parents come across the Santa breaking down in the middle of the road. And in the car, they offer him a ride to see where he wants to go. He pulls a gun, shoots Billy's dad, and then the car reverses back into a ditch. Billy manages to escape, and his dad's completely dead, isn't he?
Yeah.
And then he pulls out the mum and slits her throat right in front of Billy, and poor little Ricky is crying in the back of the car. So Billy's witnessed all of this from the ditch, and then it goes on 4 years later, and they're growing up in an orphanage.
Yeah, it's quite. I mean, on the surface, it's quite a shocking opening, isn't it? I mean,
it is quite disturbing. Yeah, even the granddad bit was quite disturbing. He's a creepy guy.
He's creepy, yeah. He's full of all that. He's saying Christmas Eve is the scariest night of the year and everything, isn't he? And Billy's like, well, yeah, fuck this Christmas stuff. Then I don't want to have Santa come in this way.
Changed my mind, yeah.
Yeah, it's all right, Mum.
Like, don't want Christmas.
And I think it's shot through. When I rewatched it, I was like, okay, this is pretty shocking. Because and nowadays as well, I think it was quite common then, but in the exploitation days of a certain different kind of filmmaking, but. You know, when the Santa rips open the mum's blouse and, you know, he does that before he cuts her throat. That's a typical moment, I think, from that era, which you don't get much now, which is still quite disturbing. But it's still shot through. The whole opening section is shot through with that very dark humour. Like, I like the fact that the guy in the grocery store or the convenience store he's not that surprised that he's been held up by this robber in a Santa suit, and he says, oh, it's not all about phony sentiment then, is it? It's a lot of it's just genuine greed, and like you said, shot dead for a small amount of money. So the fact that it's all set to the music from the radio on Christmas Eve as well adds that bittersweet extra bit of irony, I suppose. But yeah, it's quite a potent first section. And it's an unusual film, I think, because the slasher movies of the time, and indeed later, typically have maybe a 5-minute prologue where it sets up the scene of this happened to the killer when he was younger, and then you're on to the modern day stuff. But like you said, instead, the first 25 minutes of this film are essentially the flashbacks. It's Billy as a kid, not Billy the kid, and then it's Billy a bit older and in the orphanage 4 years later.
Which essentially is possibly just as bad as what happened to him, you know, when his parents died. You know, the whole run of living in the orphanage with Mother Superior.
Yeah, who's a total monster.
She's evil. She doesn't seem to understand, you know, the stress and post PTSD that he must be suffering from. I think that's why they could do that back then. You know, could you imagine this film now? It just wouldn't happen, would it?
No.
He would be raised as a bit of a snowflake, I guess.
Yeah, it is interesting to watch it now, actually. And I know you've seen it recently, but the fact that they did something quite different with the eventual remake, it says a lot, really. Yeah, it wouldn't be made in this way. And this section is actually, I really like this section. I would have happily stuck with the orphanage section for longer than it is. It's she's an impressively fearsome character, you know, happy to dish out an arse whacking with her belt if he just leaves his room or has understandable nightmares. You know, maybe this boy was always going to have the odd nightmare. Yeah,
forcing him to sit on Santa's lap. What the hell?
Only punches him, does he?
Yeah, he's like absolutely traumatized.
Yeah. And I suppose, I mean, maybe this is the kind of thing that I'm sure this is the kind of thing that went on in orphanages in the 70s, especially when there was no concept of, like you said, PTSD in children. And this woman who is played as a kind of almost pantomime monster really well by the veteran actress Lillian Chauvin. I looked her career up and she's done everything. She's long dead. I mean, she was 300 years old in this, but she's done everything from like Magnum to Predator 2, Friends. You know, she's had a massive career. But yeah, it's an interesting section, and it's really well played, I think, not just by her, but I think the kid is actually really good as well, considering what he has to do. And I really like Billy in all his portrayals. Yes, actually, yeah.
Not being a big fan of kids, definitely not as main characters in movies and stuff, but yeah, he does so well.
Yeah,
and you really root for him. You feel really sorry for him.
Yeah, you totally are. I mean, there's because the Mother Superior is the main adult character in this, apart from Billy, I suppose. But you do get a sort of what I thought initially was going to be a Sam Loomis from Halloween style character, which is one of the younger sisters that she's working with,
Yeah.
who I guess is trying to warn about Billy's possible destiny. And she's the one that's
Yeah.
actually paying attention to the fact that, hang on a minute, maybe he's got
Yeah.
some demons here and it gets worse
Yeah.
at Christmas. Do you think this could be a problem in the future? Oh, no.
think this
Let's
is
whack him
linked.
with the belt.
Yeah.
One thing that did disturb me is that I'm sure it's no reflection of my eventual fate, but the fact that Billy's drawings at the orphanage with decapitated reindeer are very similar to the ones I did at school, but obviously I turned out okay.
Oh, that's because you probably weren't punished for it in that way, or forced to sit on Santa's lap.
You see, that's it. That's where it went wrong for poor old Billy boy.
Poor Billy.
But of course, then he grows up. We cut to 1984, and again, it works really well. I think it's maybe a strangely structured film, but I think it moves, doesn't it? It moves really quite well.
Yeah, it kind of skips up a beat and it goes a little bit more light-hearted as well.
Yes, that's what I like.
The first bit when Billy gets the job, they get him a job at the toy store, and like the first weeks or so, they have this amazing little montage of how well he's doing. You actually think, "Oh, good on you, Billy! Well done! You finally made it.
You've broken free." Yeah, yeah.
Everything's
really
going to be okay now.
And there's not many slasher films like this where you really root for the killer because you feel sorry for, because you've had more detail than usual of the child abuse and the terrible trauma. Just as much fun as that. I love the toy store stuff. I think this is great. I love the fact that Toy Store is run by this guy that absolutely hates Christmas, and as soon as we close on Christmas Eve, he gets the booze out and he said, "Oh, thank fuck for that." But also you get those fantastic montages, as you said, where you get a proper good look at all the cool 80s toys.
Yes.
Like even Smurfs, even like action figures from Krull. I never knew anyone that had action figures from Krull, which was a big fantasy movie at the time. Return of the Jedi figures. Yeah, that was quite some nostalgia. Whoosh.
Yeah, takes you back.
But yeah, Billy is quite buff now. Clearly slightly unhinged, but he's handsome. Played by Robert Brian Wilson, who I don't think acted again. I'm sure I looked him up. I don't think he did much after this. He may not have done anything else, but again, he's pretty good in the role, isn't he?
Yeah, really good. Don't know why he didn't carry it on.
Yeah, absolutely. What are your thoughts about the there's one song in this which I couldn't get out of my head, which was, I think it was called "The Warm Side of the Door." These slightly terrible country infused sort of Christmas songs that I think they wrote especially for the film, from the sounds of it.
Oh, yeah, okay. To be fair, I didn't really pay that much attention.
It's just...
Sorry.
That's okay. I will delete it from my Spotify account. I haven't been listening to it much.
But I was going to say, you could give us a few lines. I might remember it.
Oh, yeah, I'll work on it. Yeah, it's coming back to me slowly. Yeah, no worries.
I do like it when they do that, though, rather than just the same generic Christmas songs, because you do tend to switch off. Sometimes you will hear stuff in the background and you'll be like, oh, okay.
That's
right. I've had that one before. Not sure about that one. But yeah, you do kind of notice it. But I think I was probably a little bit too wrapped up in all the jolliness of it all. Yeah,
and it's in the absolutely. I think it's in the category as well as the kind of really bland muzak you would hear in a toy store or at Christmas. I think it's quite clever, and it fits with everything else in the film, which is a little bit satirical about this stuff and this kind of shop. This section's really good as well. I mean, the thing that tips him over the edge, I suppose, is being coerced into dressing up as the store Santa. That's the thing, really, isn't it? That nudges him.
Yep.
And he's got that awful colleague. What's that guy's name? He's such a bullying bastard.
Oh, Andy, the guy who's like
Andy.
Superior, who's just sitting around with his feet on the table.
Yeah, and he's awful to women as well. He's got that dishy girl that he likes, and he's awful, which triggers a sort of flashback to Billy's mum's fate, doesn't it, with more blouse ripping.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the section where we do delve fully into the slasher section, and he's had flashbacks to his mum being abused and killed, and he strings the guy up with Christmas lights. And again, there's I suppose a fairly standard shot you wouldn't get these days, I don't think, where it's a close up of a knife. I think it's in Andy's girlfriend's abdomen or something, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you get a close up where her boobs are out, which was on the exploitative end of the slasher genre in the 80s, and now I think things have changed, so you wouldn't really get leery close-ups like that anymore.
No.
Although potentially you'd get bludgeoning for a few minutes, because it seems to be an emphasis on that these days, which is a bit different to the short, sharp kills of the 80s. But then we're on to a Jolly Holly slasher rampage, Sarah.
Yay!
Which
He's just on it after then, because Mr. Sims then comes in to find out what's going on, because he thinks he can hear something. He goes into the back room, so Billy's just killed Andy and Pamela. And Mr. Sims has gone in. There's him and one of the other women of the shop, Mrs. Randall, who is hilarious, isn't she?
They're getting shit-faced.
Oh, yeah, getting absolutely, pissed up on the booze. He wanders into the back room and gets a claw hammer in his head. That's another thing about this film, though. He never uses, like with your Friday the 13th and stuff, the kills are fairly standard, uses the same kind of thing. This time, Billy gets a little bit inventive and uses pretty much something different every time. So it's the Christmas lights with Andy, the knife with Pamela, claw hammer with Mr. Sims, which goes straight into the top of his head. And then Mrs. Randall gives him a little bit of the runaround by trying to hide from him. But she still ends up getting shot by an arrow.
Yes, that's right. Every kill's different.
You've had 4 different kills before he's really started, but then he legs it and is just off on one. And the person that turns up just after he's left is Sister Margaret, who got him the job. When she just heard that he was going to be Santa, she thinks, maybe I'll just go and check on him.
Yeah, do some follow-up work with that one.
Just might see how he's going with this plan. And turns up that a little bit too late and discovers everybody dead in the toy shop and him gone.
Yeah, I've got some skepticism about this orphanage's aftercare.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit lacking.
At least he bothered to check up on him, I suppose. It'd been a few months.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure he's fine. Well, let's just do a bit of legwork. I mean, this is a really busy stretch of the film, and you've got the most famous sectional kill, I suppose, is still Linnea Quigley's appearance.
Yes.
And this was a year before she plays Trash in Return of the Living Dead. Mm-hmm. So I guess at this stage, she's in Savage Streets, which I think was the same year. I think it was 84 as well. So Linnea Quigley maybe wasn't that well known at this stage. She'd done a couple of things. And
I'm guessing her performance as Denise possibly got her the role as Trash, though.
Yeah, it makes sense, doesn't it?
Definitely. I mean, everyone calls their cats in topless, surely. This is why my neighbours don't talk to me.
I knew it.
And always just look at me a little bit weird.
It is one of those moments, isn't it? But really, and again, not uncommon in the time when you'd go out and listen to a strange noise in the woods wearing a towel.
Yeah, well, her and her boyfriend are messing around on the pool table, and she can hear her little sister coming down, so she puts her top back on. Just because she hears her sister coming downstairs, tells her to go back upstairs, then the top comes off again, and then it's like, okay, I'm just going to go out and get the cat in. And whoops, I forgot to put my top on.
And the Return of the Living Dead producers watching this. Right.
She'll do,
Problem solved. Yeah. She's not, I mean, she's perfect as Trash, actually, but she's not perhaps the best actress, and never was, but, I think she seemed to enjoy being in these movies. And there was quite a few of them. A lot of them were not as good as this, it has to be said. But she's well cast in this, and Night of the Demons. I think she's really well cast in that. There's the quite ditzy one that gets possessed. So she fits the bill.
She's great fun.
She is good fun, and she has a really fun death, which I think is unique in genre as well.
Definitely. She definitely has one of the best ones.
Yeah. And this was probably the most famous one in the film. She's impaled on antlers, and certainly in the unrated cut, which is part of the recommendation that we have for the second sight. It is second sight, isn't it? No, it's not. It's 101 films. Sorry, 101 films. Sorry. Oops. Second sight are great too, but 101 Films have released a set with this in the UK and the sequel, and it's very nice. And it has the unrated version, which you get a couple more penetration shots of her on the antlers, which I don't think were in the original cut, which is a shame because it's quite a good effect for the time.
Yeah.
Good old-fashioned rubbery practical effect. And it's just a memorable death. and every slasher movie should have at least one of those.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of the film, yeah, I mean, it breezes along before you know it, doesn't it? You've got the sled scene.
Yeah, that is really random, though, isn't it?
Yeah, totally random.
That is actually probably the bit that made me laugh the most, especially the two young lads walking down the hill going, virgin snow, and you can clearly see footprints everywhere.
Hang on a minute. It's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Yeah, there's that. I mean, he gets his head lopped off, doesn't he? One of those guys.
Yeah, the evil guys, the bully guys. They push off the two young lads and nick their sleds, and then one of them gets his head chopped off. Serves them right.
There is a lot. It's the common theme here. In fact, probably Billy is, well, I guess Mr. Sims, but there's not many male characters in this that aren't awful bullies, are there? It seems to be the trend.
Yeah, true.
The Linnea Quigley's boyfriend, I can't remember much about him. He wasn't offensive, I don't think.
No, he didn't really do a lot.
Yeah. No, he's just there to get killed. But the rest of them, yeah, geez, Billy, it's such a bad rap. I mean, the orphanage and the parents thing, and then grows up and everyone's awful. What the best bit about as the film kind of gets to the final act is the cops on the chase. They're trying to catch the culprit. I mean, they're making jokes about the fact that Santa's on the loose. And I like the fact that their investigation basically seems to stretch to just kind of busting into people's houses and pointing guns at dads that are just in their kids' bedrooms on Christmas Eve. Oh, whoops, sorry, mate.
And sending one cop to the orphanage, just the one.
It's brilliant. Yeah, it's not a police force that you can particularly trust. But yeah, again, the movie's barreling along. And before you know it, you're kind of at the sort of a climactic action, which is where the unfortunately timed, I think it's, because they say it, I think it's Father O'Brien. Oh my God, it's Father O'Brien. The unfortunately known deaf old Santa at the orphanage has
damn it, yeah,
up at the wrong moment.
Yep. Gets shot by the cop who's calling and calling, and obviously he can't hear him. And he just shoots him on sight, right in front of the kids that are playing outside. And more importantly, right in front of Ricky, which is Billy's younger brother, who is still in the orphanage.
Yes. And that's it, isn't it? So I presume, I mean, I don't know if you agree, but I'm guessing that he's positioned there in this film because he's incidental all the way through, really. But this is presumably because they wanted a sequel with Ricky, right?
Yeah, I'm guessing so, yeah. We'll just kind do these like central moments. Oh, look, there's Ricky. Just mention Ricky.
Yeah. How is he? He's
still there.
Because that's the thing. I mean, they were obviously fishing for a franchise, and the film is plotted so that Billy doesn't make it all the way through. Well, I suppose they could have done the usual thing of saying, he had 12 bullet wounds, but he's all right. He's pulled through.
Yeah, we couldn't find the body. It's disappeared.
Missing from the morgue in the first section.
They totally could have done that. That would have worked.
They could have done. But I suppose Ricky's a handy backup plan.
Yeah.
Especially if you can't get the same actor. Not that matters that much, I suppose, but I guess that maybe was a thing. But I like the fact that, these kids at the orphanage, not only do they have, the mother superior from hell, but now they're witnessing the most traumatic stuff that this is going to set them back a long time.
Yeah. Far from ruining Billy's life all those years ago in the orphanage, it's now going through it again. We're shooting more Santas in front of these poor little orphan children. That's another 20 children that are now going to be traumatized.
Yeah, it's a great finale, though, isn't it? I think that it goes all out. I mean, it's good all the way through, but I like its dedication to things like this, the massacre of Santas. And of course, in the end, it cuts away to Ricky, doesn't it? And I suppose the final bit with him, it's a bit. It came out the same year, but it reminds me of final chapter of Friday the 13th, Part 4, where Corey Feldman. Well, it doesn't really pan out ultimately, but Corey Feldman is suggested that he might be a kind of substitute Jason now that Jason's been killed in what was going to be the final chapter. So, although I think the films probably didn't see each other, they came out the same year, and they seem to have a similar kind of wrap up with that not so subtle hint that maybe this one will take over the rampage.
Well, yeah, I didn't think of that at the time, but yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean that essentially is Silent Night, Deadly Night. I mean, any further thoughts, Sarah? I think it's a rollicking good ride.
It is. It's so much fun, and yeah, as we were saying earlier, I mean, you do really root for Billy. You like him all the way through, and the fact that he's quite inventive in the way he does things. Although he's pretty, when he goes into like bad Santa mode, he suddenly tends to lose like all intelligence and really just kind of says punish and naughty, and that's about it. But his final words at the end are quite sweet as well, though, because he goes for Mother Superior, doesn't he? You think he's going to
Yes.
get her, and then just as he gets to her, Sister Margaret and the main cop, Captain Richards, turn up, and he shoots Billy 3 times in the back, and Billy kind of falls, grab hold of Mother Superior, who kind of swipes him off. She's in a wheelchair and stuff now, trying to show how more frail she is, I guess, than to when he was a kid. And he's lying on the floor, and his like little dying words are, "You're safe now, Santa Claus is gone." And you're like, oh, poor Billy.
Yeah. Oh, he's a good character, isn't he?
He's really good, yeah.
Yeah, he is well played. I think the film is well cast, actually, for a low budget thing of that time. It's pretty well done, and it's just good fun. And was this the first time you'd seen it?
It was, yeah. Yep, that one had passed me by.
Nice. Yeah, it's worth saying in the UK this didn't really come out in the 80s. This was one of those ones. I think actually for some strange reason, I guess the controversy of this one, especially in the 80s in the UK when there was the whole video nasties thing going on, horror had a bad name. I think no one bothered to submit the first one for a certificate, but they did with the second one, and the second one was rejected outright. So the first 2 films never came out on video in the UK, and it was only much later in the DVD era that the first one came out. And I think the recent Blu-ray from 101 Films is the first time the second one's actually been on any home format in the UK, which is weird, really, when you think about it. Especially as so many other 80 slashers have come out over time. So it took a long time, really, for this stuff to come out in the UK properly. And it's a bit of a shame, because I was a big fan of slashers in the 80s, and this one I would have loved had I had a chance to see it back in the day.
Yeah, it would probably be a lot more popular than it is now.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's so inventive and it's humorous and it has the story and morals to it, and it's kind of seasonal as well. So, it doesn't ram Christmas down your throat either.
That is true.
Which is something I always have a bit of a problem with some of the movies.
Yeah, that is true. Where would you put it in the... I mean, it's one of a bunch of Christmas horror films of the early 80s, and there's a few with... different one is Don't Open Till Christmas. I don't know if you've seen that, which is where the twist is the killer is killing people dressed as Santa. So, and it's British, so it's a rare British slasher film of that time. And it's really sleazy and scuzzy and low budget. And you feel a bit dirty watching it. But it's actually really good fun because it is fairly bad. Carolyn Munro shows up in that film for no reason, really, just to sing a song. She appears to be playing herself. But yeah, that's an interesting one.
That sounds good.
Christmas Evil is an interesting one. That's more of a character-driven thing where you actually... It's a bit similar to Billy, actually. You feel quite sorry for the Santa, who is kind of going on a rampage, but is also traumatized by, I think in that case, it's seeing his mum having sex with Santa as a kid, which would do it. That would do it. Yeah. So there's a few of them. To All a Good Night is another one, which I rewatched on YouTube not long ago, and that's not terribly good, but it's a killer in a Santa costume that turns out to be someone's mum.
Okay.
Or the house mother at a sorority house. I think that's it. Yeah. So there's a few, but this is probably the best. I do like Christmas Evil, but it's quite different to this. I think this is the best of the more slashery killer Santa flicks. Silent Night, Deadly Night. It's a cracker. Lovely. And of course, it didn't end there, though.
Oh, no.
As subtly hinted at by the end of Silent Night, Deadly Night, there was a sequel. And Gorblimey, was there a sequel? So the setup for this is that Lee Harry, who directed and edited the sequel, Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2, was given a short time frame, basically, and he had to turn around a bunch of new scenes featuring the surviving character of Ricky and frame them around a whole bunch of footage to be reused from the original film. So this is a strange, maybe a unique one actually, because it does consist of, I was trying to add it up, but most of the first half of Silent Night Deadly Night is footage from the previous film. So it's a pretty opportunistic way of not having to shoot that much new stuff, but still, rehash the stuff from the original, which was pulled from theatre. So maybe it made more sense at the time because the first film didn't have that long in the cinemas before they nixed it. What I think is also interesting watching the extras on the 101 Films DVD was that Lee Harry, director of Part 2, didn't like the meanness of Silent Night Deadly Night. So and possibly the backlash towards it was on his mind as well. So he wanted to up the ante in a different way. So that's why, which we'll talk about, the death scenes in Part 2 are just really silly. They're deliberately really goofy and mental rather than anything truly nasty. I think this film does have a slightly different tone, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, which is quite cool because you end up with something that is totally bonkers, but in a rather different way to the first one. So yeah, Silent Night Deadly Night 2, Sarah, what's your initial thoughts on this one?
Oh, same as you, just absolutely bonkers. You have Eric Freeman, who plays Ricky Caldwell. So obviously, he rehashes pretty much the whole of Silent Night Deadly Night, the first one, in a series of flashbacks whilst talking to a psychiatrist. He's been incarcerated himself now, hasn't he? Because of what happened to him.
Yeah.
Basically saying, even though I was a baby, I remember all this stuff, which is kind of laughable in itself, isn't it? But he rehashes all of this to a doctor who's recording him, which kind of like, I'm guessing they're trying to figure out what led to him going on his killing sprees and stuff as to how he's ended up where he is.
Yeah.
He rehashes all that, as you say. It pretty much takes up the most of the first part of the film, but I still found it quite good. They obviously kept it fairly brief and recapped it quite well with the footage that they had from the original movie, didn't they?
Actually, yeah, it's quite fun, isn't it? I like the fact that the psychiatrist. I like the stuff with the psychiatrist. He's quite well played, actually. The guy they got to play him.
Yeah, he's quite gloomy and mysterious, and
he looks the part. Yeah.
And Ricky's just chain smoking and giving people the evils. There's the funniest bit is one of the bits at the beginning when the orderly comes in with the tape recorder, and he's absolutely crapping himself to walk into the room with Ricky, who's literally just kind of giving him the evils, and that's about it. A proper pooing his pants, isn't he? It's
really funny. Yeah, absolutely. I think so. It's so good. Eric Freeman is truly unique. I mean, we'll talk about him obviously, but I like the fact, it really makes sense. I'm sure from memory, Ricky's first words on camera are actually "fuck off." It makes sense because he has that vibe all the way through the film. I like that the psychiatrist is the 13th person to do the job to, go in and interview Ricky, who, like you said, everyone else is cacking themselves. And yeah, the flashbacks, it wasn't that unusual to have lengthy flashbacks. Like the start of Friday the 13th Part 2, I think is more or less 5 or 10 minutes of scenes from the original as part of Alice's nightmare, but this is perhaps a real extension of that cost-saving trope, I guess. And what I find quite amusing, they do try to get around it, but I like the fact that Ricky is relaying events about Billy that he was either just not there for or was a baby at the time.
And but he remembers it so well.
Yeah, and they kind of try to get around it. It's a bit like the flashback in Hills Have Eyes Part 2 from the point of view of the dog. They tried to get around it. And I think at one stage Ricky says, "Oh yeah, Billy told me everything." Oh, right.
Yeah, that explains it.
But it's quite amusing because he remembers everything. He even remembers things where it was just Billy on his own or Billy having a nightmare. That is obviously a scene from the old one.
All his kills in the toy shop, he was there for that.
Yeah, he was around, or he was just told about it. Well, you never guess what I did last night. What's that? Rung him up after each murder.
Yeah,
Ricky jotting it down.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's great. This whole film, obviously, this takes the flashback frame stuff takes up a while, but even then, this whole film really does kind of pivot around Eric Freeman. What I like, again though, it still does that thing of it shows a glimpse of Ricky as, I think he's initially about 12. It has a little montage, doesn't it?
Yeah, when he finds a family And he actually finds a really nice family, doesn't he? For a little while, he's quite settled.
I like that he's still scared of nuns. Like when he sees a nun, the music from what sounds like something like The Omen plays, this chanty evil music for a nun walking down the street. Yeah, he does seem to have that. What I also like about this, which I don't think I ever noticed before somehow, is that you see him at 15 and at 18. At 18, he's played by Eric Freeman, but at 15, he's played by a different actor that looks totally different and looks about 30.
Yeah.
Hang on a minute. How does he turn into Eric Freeman? This pumped up kind of.
Yeah, is that when his dad dies and he kind of does his first kills with the dude in the field?
Yes.
Is that Eric Freeman or is that a different character? Because I'm kind of like, yeah, that is a different.
That's a different actor playing Ricky. Yeah, but just a couple of years earlier. Yeah.
So that's kind of when he starts doing it, doesn't he? He starts killing himself, but in the same kind of way of his brother. You know,
and it's the same trigger. Yeah.
He sees a creepy guy coming on to his girlfriend and she's trying to like shun his advances and stuff. And, you know, he loses his crap, has a flashback to his parents like Billy did. And then, gets in a truck and runs the guy over. But the girl's a little bit more grateful this time. So when Billy killed Andy in the first one, she wasn't actually that happy about it, was she? Whereas the girlfriend in this is like, oh, thanks very much. Thank God for that. See you later.
Yeah, it's brilliant, isn't it? This is an absolutely great reaction because he's right. He's not just run him over; he's kind of rolled over him a few times.
Several times, yeah.
She says, "Cheers, very much." That's brilliant.
Thanks. Off I go.
But yeah, you're right. It's a similar trigger. He's still this this awful chauvinist that's won't take no for an answer that he picks up on and gets the flashback, or Billy's kind of second-hand flashback.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, he's killing awful people in this. He kills the. Probably my favourite kill of either of the films. He kills the loan shark guy.
Yes.
In a sort of weird slasher movie version of Singing in the Rain with an umbrella.
Yeah, it's great.
And he opens it up.
Yeah, and it's just kind of bloody and red whilst it's just raining and it's just sticking out of him. That's great. That's a really good kill. We like the inventiveness of this.
I think so, and it does. I think the director is right. I think this does have a different tone, and it's very, very knowing. It's very self-aware. This one, as we'll speak about in a second with the scene in the cinema. But
God, yes,
which is brilliant. Ricky is looking great. I mean, he's got a leather jacket. He's weird, isn't he? He's kind of like he's somewhere between a sort of intimidating lout, really, because he's very arrogant seeming, but he's also a bit of a buffoon because. There's that scene where he falls in love with Elizabeth Caton, who is beautiful in this, and he falls off his bike because he's too busy. God blimey! And he falls off his bike in a kind of slapstick Benny Hill fashion. And then, of course, probably one of the unsexiest sex scenes of all time, which is that weird sequence where they have sex. It's just this lingering shot of her bum.
Yeah, it's a little bit awkward, isn't it? And I think the music is kind of weird as well. I think that's what kind of gives it that kind of dodgy atmosphere. The music's a bit off. It's all a little bit off. So. Like you say, it is awkward.
And I could never tell with this one if it's also off because he's so strange or if it is just the film.
Yeah, well, he does say it's like it was his first time and stuff like that. So maybe it was made deliberately slightly awkward.
It is, and it's Eric Freeman's line delivery, isn't it, as well? Because he's talking about her a lot, and he's got these weird pauses, like "I never wanted to lose her."
yeah, that's him all the way through, really, isn't it? We'll get to that with the laugh.
But it's also brilliant. I mean, she's Elizabeth Caton, who I always thought was one of the really great scream queens of the 80s. Although she didn't really do many great films, I think she's in Friday 7, and I think she's in Slumber Party Massacre 2. Don't quote me on that. I don't know. I may have made that up, but yeah, she's very good, and she's playing it quite straight, or up to a point. There's a bit of something later that we'll mention, but she's playing quite straight as the love interest, and he's obviously totally off his face. And then we get to what I think is one of the great slasher scenes of the 80s, which is the cinema sequence, which is essentially, I mean, a few slasher films were doing this in the 80s, but this one maybe is the boldest of it. It's a massively ahead of its time, really, in terms of what the Scream franchise was doing much later. In fact, Scream 2 has a sequence that's pretty much this sequence from Silent Night, Deadly Night 2. So it all comes from these 80s films, and this is one of them, which is a scene in the cinema where they're showing like a trailer for a film called Chaos, which is seemingly a spoof of the outrage about Silent Night, Deadly Night, because the trailer's all about more destruction and death than you've ever seen before. And you've got the hecklers in the back row, who are those people that always should die, which is people that talk during the movie in a cinema. They all should be stabbed in the face, clearly.
Yeah, and this one's really, really irritating, isn't he?
Awful. Yeah,
Terrible.
He calls Ricky names. Yeah, it's awful. I like the fact that he calls him an unpleasant gay slur, and Elizabeth Caton says, "Oh, we know that's not true."
Yeah.
Which is. She's sort of oblivious to this. She's literally oblivious to Ricky popping off to the back road to kill them. Which
yeah.
And of course one of the biggest jokes of this scene is the film they're actually watching is of course Sarah.
It's about a killer Santa.
Yeah, this seems very familiar.
and Ricky just goes, "What?" Like she's supposed to know, but everyone, we all know, and that's just the best thing about it.
Yeah, I think, I can only assume, but I presume this whole sequence is a bit of a kind of jab and a spoof at the violence in movies debate, because as soon as the movie comes on, oh, and look, it's Silent Night, Deadly Night, Ricky's like, punish.
Yes.
So, straight away then. What's her name's weird ex-boyfriend shows up.
Chip,
who's an awful person, but because Ricky's set off by the colour red, Chip has a red car and a red top and probably red underpants as well. And he's awful, isn't he? He's another horrible male character.
Yeah, it's just trying to get Jennifer back, and she's not having any of it, but he's still trying.
And all the way through the sequence, they're all commenting on it, like, "Oh, that guy's going down to the basement without a torch, and this movie's so stupid." So it's just a fantastic, self-aware sequence. I always loved that scene, and that's a great moment actually. And it's one of a bunch of scenes set in a cinema in 80s slasher movies. I don't know if you've seen He Knows You're Alone, but that opens with a bunch of people watching a slasher movie. After a couple of minutes, you realise they're watching it rather than that we're watching the scene for real. And Anguish as well. Half of Anguish, which came a bit later than this, I think, is a film within a film. I think it's about half an hour in that the film pulls back to reveal that the previous half hour was actually a film being watched by the real characters.
Oh, wow. That's clever. I like stuff like that.
Me too, yeah. It's actually cool that they were doing it as early as this, and in this case it's just hilarious. But yeah, so Chip has had his chip, Sarah, and figures in what is the mayhem of the second half. So do you want to have a chat about what happens next ish?
Yeah, so it was probably literally like the next day they bump into Chip, who's messing around with his car and shooting his mouth off, and I think he's like goading Ricky as much as he possibly can, saying, "Oh, it actually speaks," and stuff like that, and Ricky just loses it pretty much straight away. I think he then kind of realizes that he thought Jennifer was a virgin innocently, didn't he?
Yes.
Beforehand, and that's when he twigged that she wasn't, and he suddenly just kind of lost it, and it just leads up to another couple of really great kills, because he grabs the I don't even know what they're called. Why I'm having a brain fart. He's got the clips on the battery.
I like the car. Those
jump leads. We know cars. Yeah, we're car people.
Yeah, that thing we know what plug up the what's it? Yeah, that. Yeah,
that thing. He grabs them and electrocutes Chip with the car battery in a nice, spectacular way, and then just as Jennifer goes to run, he manages to rip the aerial off the car and throttle her with it. And I think that's when he just then kind of he goes into like crazy laughing guy mode after that, doesn't he? Where he just kind of stands there and goes ha 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 like that for quite a while.
Really strange. Yeah, really.
You're like what is going on with that? He's having some kind of moment there, just going into crazy guy mode, and it just all goes a little bit mental from there. Where does he get the gun from? Oh, it's from the cop, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, forgotten. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
The cop turns up pretty much after he's managed to kill those two, like kind of what's going on here with the dead bodies type thing. Yeah. holds a gun at him, and Ricky manages to then turn the gun on the cop, and he shoots himself in the head. So he steals his gun and goes on a little killing spree just around the village, doesn't he?
It's quite strange, isn't it? Yeah, this
Just
what would otherwise be quite disturbing.
Yeah, just shooting random people as they're walking out of the porch.
In the daytime, yeah. And of course the famous line of the movie.
Garbage day.
Garbage day. Which is, I suppose, sorry, I guess it's in keeping with like the one-liners of the time. One-liners were in action films, weren't they, in the 80s, and horror movies.
That must be where that's got to be from. But let's go for a guy putting up the rubbish and just have him shout "Garbage day"
in that way.
Then shoot him, and then walk off. Ha 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 ha.
Yeah, the weird laugh.
He's proper crazy. It's quite random, but also but a lot of fun to watch.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, is he a bad actor, or is he just a very good portrait of a madman? That's the question.
Know. That is the question. I'm still wondering that.
He could be a genius actor.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, sorry, what?
I was going to say, it's certainly some great eyebrow acting at different stages.
Yeah, they kind of have a mind of their own. Give the eyebrows an Oscar.
Yeah, best supporting actor, best supporting eyebrows. Yeah, they've got it. They're shoo-in for that if it's not too late. Yeah, that's crazy, that scene. I like that he shoots at a car and manages to make it explode. That's quite impressive.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you always got to have one of them, don't you? And then literally straight after that, a small little girl kind of rides her bike into him, doesn't she?
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah.
He just kind of says, "Sorry, mister," and then he just looks down and goes, "That's okay," and then turns around and there's a massive police blockade in front of him. All kind of aiming weapons at him, and they have this big old, they're all shouting at him to, drop the gun, and rah, 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 what are you doing? And then he kind of turns the gun on himself, and they're like, "Don't do it, man! You gotta live!" That kind of stuff, all that kind of going on. Then he goes to shoot himself, but he's run out of bullets, so that's when he gets arrested. And then we're kind of like where we are, aren't we? Present day type thing. He's figured out now what he has to do, and it kind of pulls back, and old Dr. Bloom has been strangled with his own recording tape, and Ricky has done a bunk and escaped out of the building. Yeah,
and he's and you've got the he goes back to see the old Mother Superior. I like that the Mother Superior in this one is played by a different actress, and to kind of get away with that, they say that she's had a stroke, and it's one of those strokes that gives you burn marks on your face.
Yeah, weird lumpy growths.
Which is strange, and absolutely.
Did you notice what number house she lives at as well?
Yes, I like that. In case you didn't know how evil she was, she lives at 666, Satan Avenue or something. She's really fucking evil. And they've made her look even more evil with the
with the lumpy face. Yeah,
it's great. I mean, he's back on his old stomping ground in a Santa suit after the weird diversion to kind of random daylight shooting stuff. Yeah. And he's ripping off The Shining by looking through the axe hole in the door.
And it's truly random, isn't it? Because there's this whole bit, obviously, Mother Superior's in a wheelchair, and she starts off downstairs, and then for some reason she appears upstairs again, and then he's chasing her through the house, and you see her wheeling herself up to the top of the stairs, and you're well, how the hell is this going to happen? And then you see the stair lift, and you're like, really? She's going to take the stair lift? Those things are really slow, and Ricky still doesn't manage to catch up to her in time. But then she's back downstairs again, and they have the final showdown in the dining room.
Yeah, and he's still carrying on the tradition of almost commenting on the film itself, and for the audience's benefit by saying things like, "Oh, good, I love a chase," as he's running around after her.
And he's gone kind of monosyllabic as well, hasn't he? In the whole punish, naughty. Yeah. There's a really, really great line, which is like you say, there's along the same kind of lines as the garbage day line, right at the end of the show, the end of the film, where I think Mother Superior, just before he gets to her, she goes, "You're being very naughty," and he just goes, "Naughty this."
Yeah.
You're like, wow, Great line there. Classic.
That is another, yeah. You can imagine a couple of people being really proud of themselves, sitting around the, the one-liner table. Oh,
Yeah.
what else? Oh, yeah, naughty this.
Yeah. That's right back at you. That's going to hurt. Get a run in the fields.
And actually, I don't know how it played back in the day, but actually I think this would be a great audience film because it's got all those beats that, something like Fright Fest would get a massive chuckle and probably applause at different points.
Yeah.
And he keeps on laughing. Even when he's being shot.
Yeah. Yep. Ha 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 ha. He's great. We love him.
He's great.
I have found like a massive anomaly between the two films, though. Something that I picked up on only watching Silent Night, Deadly Night for the second time because I had to go back and watch it again because there's things I wasn't sure about. And I think I've picked up on something. So in the first Silent Night, Deadly Night, we've already said when Billy goes back to the orphanage when he's grown up and the cop's there and he shoots the first Santa, that they say, oh, that's deaf old Father O'Brien.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
Right? In Silent Night, Deadly Night 2, Ricky says it was the janitor.
Oh, man.
And I'm like, no, it's not the janitor. They said in the first one that it was the deaf priest.
Which is funnier, isn't it? It's funnier if it's a deaf old Father O'Brien than it is a janitor. There's no fun from a janitor.
I was like, they've balls up there.
Man. Which is mental because they've got all that footage that they're just playing with the whole time. Oh, just check this. No, don't worry about checking it. Why?
No, because it was the janitor. I remember it was the janitor.
Definitely the janitor. Yeah, Jeff. Are you sure it was Jeff? Yeah. Put Jeff in the script. That'd be. I mean, it clearly was rushed, wasn't it? I mean, clearly they had a short schedule. They contractually obliged to shoehorn in a bunch of footage, and they came up with something so random and mental that you almost can't believe it's got a release in the cinemas in America, at least.
Yeah, I think they kind of they got a bit caught up with what they're doing and forgot a little bit of the continuity there. But it's still made for a great film. It still is. It's a good sequel, isn't it? It's the only way it could have gone.
The fact is,
unless they were going to go like down the Friday the 13th thing and kind of make him a kind of supernatural crazy person, but they kind of decided against that.
Yeah, I think so, and I like that it's not that nasty. I like that it's quite playful in its kills. It's not rapey or nasty, is it? It's just quite fun, really. And his performance, intentional or not, I don't know. He's a mystery to me. But his performance, he's so off the wall that it really transforms it. You can't imagine anybody else doing this role. Even a good actor. I mean, he may well be a good actor. Who knows? But you just can't imagine it now without him.
No.
But everybody's kind of in on the joke. Like, I never remembered this until I rewatched it last week, but I like the fact that Elizabeth Caton, before she dies, she actually gulps out loud before she's strangled with the car aerial, which you never see except in cartoons. So I figured that, okay, so she's in on the joke too, even though her character is played quite straight and she's just a nice girl. I like that. I think, there's a huge amount of fun from Silent Night, Deadly Night 2. I think that's probably it with part 2. I mean, it's one of those films.
They leave it a bit open, don't they? Because once again, they do the usual thing of, he gets shot by the cops. Ricky gets shot by the cops just in time before he kills a different sister. He manages to decapitate Mother Superior, which is great, and Billy's probably very proud of him for that. But yeah, the final shot does show him getting shot, but then at the end you see him open his eyes. Yeah. So you're like, oh, is he? Isn't he?
The final cutaway.
The usual,
It's not over. Yeah, I guess that's I suppose, almost obligatory by that stage. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But unfortunately, I mean, Eric Freeman famously sort of vanished, and he was located eventually for the extras that are on the Blu-ray, which I think are carried over from the American Scream Factory release. But there was a long time where, as far as I can tell, a lot of filmmakers or documentary makers were trying to track him down, and he was quite elusive. But eventually he agreed to talk about it. And he does talk about it in the extras with some reverence and not taking it hugely seriously. I'm not sure you'd recognise him if you saw him walking down the street these days, but then it has been like 30 plus years since it was made. But, at least he showed up and talked about it.
Yeah.
And it is. I think it's a really fun film. I think this, as far as sequels go, this is a lot more fun than a lot of sequels. It's more fun than Scream 3, for example. This one I would watch again lots of times. Scream 3, maybe not. So
yeah, I could happily watch both of them back to back on a regular basis and still enjoy them. And once again, this one doesn't shove. Well, it's even less Christmassy than the other one, really, isn't it? But it still has a festive undertone.
Yeah, it seems like it's shot in California or something, because everything is quite sunny, isn't it? If it is December, then I assumed it's because it's like LA or something. It downplays the Christmas, but yeah, it's a lot of fun. Do check it out. I mean, it's part 2 is on Prime, isn't it?
Yes.
Amazon Prime, at least in the UK. Part 1 isn't, I don't think, but you can get it on Blu-ray or DVD.
Mm-hmm. I think you can rent it on Prime, but yeah, part 2 is free at the moment.
You should do both. Spend a couple of pounds renting the first one, watch the second one for free. Easily worth it. Guaranteed good Christmas entertainment. Much better than, I don't know, Mrs. Brown's Boys. I mean,
Yeah, and that awful one that I watched the other night.
Oh,
I can't even remember what it was called. The Nights Before Christmas. Never watched that, people. It's awful.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, The Nights Before Christmas, which is a sequel to something else.
Once Upon a Time in Christmas or something, or at Christmas.
Yeah.
Awful. Both awful.
Yeah,
watch genuinely. Instead.
If you thought the 2019 version of Black Christmas was terrible, and it is, Nights Before Christmas is actually much worse. It's genuinely
it's absolute trash.
Yeah. Absolutely awful. Yeah, I need to erase that from my memory.
Sorry.
Surgery. So please avoid those films, but do check out Silent Night, Deadly Night 1 and 2.
Yes.
Before we move on to the top 10s of the year, it's worth just, I suppose, tracking through what happened next in the franchise. So there were 3 more movies in the proper Silent Night, Deadly Night franchise, although they kind of branched off. So I would say these 3 are all worth checking out to a degree. Like number 3, which came 2 years later, I think, in 1989, and strangely is directed by quite a well-known cult filmmaker called Monty Hellman, who made Two Lane Blacktop in the 70s. He's a weird one. I mean, it's straight to video by that stage, and Ricky is back. But
I was then going to say, how do they work? Because that's my extent of the Silent Night, Deadly Night franchise. I've seen 1 and 2. I haven't seen the other. So yeah, I'm kind of intrigued as to how part 2 ended, as to how they then repeat it again for another couple of movies.
Yeah, well, it's quite odd, really. I mean, he's been in a coma, I think, for 6 years in part 3. He's now played by Bill Moseley, who
is he?
Yes, Bill Moseley. So if you've ever wanted to see Bill Moseley basically wearing a fruit bowl on his head because of the brain reconstruction surgery he's had, and wandering through the sequel to Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2 in a comatose kind of state, triggered by the colour red, so that's carried over, but he's wandering around in his hospital gown in this weird scenario where he's got like a telepathic link with this blind girl who's the heroine. So there's this strange link to that, and it's weird. It's really weird. I mean, the psychic link thing doesn't quite work. There's this weird thing with a cop played by Robert Culp. There's a lot of strange scenes where, even though this guy is clearly off his head and wearing what looks like a fruit bowl on his head because of his surgery, everyone's quite kind to him. Like there's a granny in it who is the granny of the blind girl, and she kind of shows him some hospitality, and everyone's quite calm about the fact that this guy's walking around in a hospital gown, clearly has escaped. But the film is odd. It's slow. There's not really any kills in it, or at least it's not like the first 2. They're not on camera really. Bill Moseley doesn't have anything to do except kind of lumber around as Ricky, because he's kind of been robbed of the Eric Freeman style one-liners and stuff. It's a totally different version of the character really because of the coma. And it was a couple of years after Chop Top, so Bill Moseley was established, but kind of wasted in this one. But I would still say it's worth a look because it's a real curio coming after the first 2, especially because it's a different tone. It does have. I looked back at my old notes and wrote this down. It does have what is probably, though, the ultimate kind of 80s one-liner, especially if you were there in the 80s, which is, this is a genuine kind of kiss-off line at the end when the heroine's fighting the killer, which is it live or is it Memorex? That's a genuine one-liner from the film, which is, and by 1991 it was dated. So, but yeah, so Silent Night, Deadly Night 3 is interesting, not good, but it's interesting.
Interesting. Okay, I'm putting that on my list.
You should, because I want you to watch it, and I think
I
anybody
love a bit
loves
of
the
Bill
first
Moseley.
two. Yeah, I mean he's very young, and obviously he doesn't really look like himself as Chop Top with the great makeup for Chop Top. But yeah, it's worth a look for a few reasons, I would say. After that, though, we branch off. There's no more Ricky or Billy. It's totally different in name only sequels. So the fourth one, I think, was released in some places just as Bugs, but a Silent Night, Deadly Night 4, The Initiation, in other places. And it has nothing to do with the other two, or three, rather. It's I don't think it's even set at Christmas. It's kind of film about a culty kind of setup. It's a bug worshipping cult. And it's got a good cast. It's Reggie Bannister is in it from the Phantasm films, Clint Howard. It's got some cool effects by Screaming Mad George. It's by Brian Usner. Someone gives birth to a giant mutant slug, but
cool.
It's a bit kind of okay, and it has nothing to do with Killer Santas. But don't give up, because the fifth one, which again has nothing really to do with the first three, and is also known as the Toy Maker, the fifth one is actually mental and interesting. So the fifth one basically has Mickey Rooney, who is the old Hollywood actor who was at the end of his career by 1990 something, 91 I think, when this was made. And hilariously, Mickey Rooney was one of the Hollywood actors who had protested against the first Silent Night, Deadly Night film. So here he is, career on the rocks in part 5 of Silent Night, Deadly Night. And the great thing is, though, he plays like this horrible, evil toy maker. And the one big joke of the film is that his character name is Joe Petto, which Pinocchio fans like.
Yeah.
And he's basically created this bunch of sort of eyeball poking toys that have been unleashed on kids, and it's got a great scene which is probably in line with the bad taste stuff in Silent Night, Deadly Night, which is where a young boy watches his parents having sex before basically one of his toys from Geppetto basically savages his dad's face off. So yeah, it's a strange film, but there is a couple of really nasty moments with the toys. And it's truly perverse at times. So for that reason, I think part 5 is worth checking out. Probably part 5 and 3 are the ones to go for. 4 is not worth the time, unless you really want to see Reggie Bannister in one of his less good films. But at least 5 is sort of in the spirit of the other ones, in the sense it's not taking itself too seriously, is quite nasty, and has Mickey Rooney in it.
Cool.
For sure. There was also, of course, a remake of sorts which came out down the pike called Silent Night. I have seen it. I don't remember much about it, which is why Sarah is going to have a little chat about it. What's the remake like, Sarah?
Yeah, as you say, it is a remake of sorts in the fact that it has very little to do with the original story, but by the sounds of things is a bit more Christmas related than the other 3, 4 and 5. For sure, because it's once again we're on to Killer Santas. So there is a Killer Santa in this rural country village around Christmas time. Basically, it seems like everyone in this village is dressing up as Santa this kind of time of year. They have they're really all out there having a big old Santa parade and stuff, and everyone seems to be dressing up as Santa. So this Santa kind of sneaks in with everyone else, blends in, but he's starting to kill naughty people within the town. And it's basically the story of a cop and her family, and then the police, trying to catch the bad guy with all these other Santas that aren't particularly very well behaved themselves, and they've got to try and find the right one. But it takes some great kills from Silent Night, Deadly Night, the original, and a couple of the ideas, which I think is really effective. I'm not too keen on the whole police story, and it has Malcolm McDowell, excuse me, as the main sheriff, and he really is a bit rubbish. He doesn't really seem to be paying that much attention to his job, and he just doesn't really seem to be into it. But the cops themselves are a bit bumbling, a bit doddery, a bit unsure of things, like the usual way in the Hollywood movies and stuff. But there is some great kills. The Santa kills his first guy with some Christmas lights. Not exactly the same way as Billy kills Andy, but the Christmas lights are involved. It has another girl getting impaled on antlers. Great tribute to that. In a very similar way and very graphically done. Really, really well. It also has a reference to Garbage Day from Silent Night, Deadly Night 2 as well. I think one of the cops has... he gets told to leave. He's going home at the end of the day, and the sheriff says, take the trash out, and he just walks out going, oh, bloody, what is this, Garbage Day or something? And everyone's like, hee hee.
We know.
We know what that's from. And then there's also another random bit with a grandpa in a kind of trance state. An older guy goes to visit his grandpa, and he does the same thing. He's kind of in a coma, snaps out of it, tells him, that to beware, and Christmas Eve is the worst night of the year, and watch yourself and stuff. And he ends up dying in a very similar way to Linnea Quigley's boyfriend. You kind of get little bits like that from it. So you think, to start off with, this isn't really going anywhere along the lines of what I thought it was. But then you see bits like that and you're like, that's actually kind of clever. It has some other random kills. A girl gets put in a wood chipper and stuff. So, there's plenty of gore and splattery bits. And in the end, you find out that the killer was also traumatized in a similar way to what Billy and Ricky were, and his childhood, which has led him to be the way that he is. But yeah, it was a pretty good attempt. I appreciate it for those bits. Yeah,
I remember it not being bad. It's one of those strange ones, isn't it? I'm not quite sure if it got much of a release, but I guess it was in that period where they were taking anything from the 80s that was vaguely successful and refashioning it, or doing a late sequel to it or something.
Yeah.
Which is fair enough, but it's one of the good ones from from what you've said. Silent Night. What year was that? Do you remember? I can't. It feels like it could have been.
It's 2012.
2012. Okay, wow, a while ago, I suppose.
Yeah.
It's worth a look. It's worth, all of them are worth a look, I think. I mean, we can also point you in the direction of the Horror Screams Video Vault website, where the 5 Silent Night, Deadly Night films are part of Franchise Corner. So a bit more info on there about them. And do check them out.
Yay.
So we're now moving on to the second half of the podcast, Sarah, which is, of course, a chance to look back at the year that was 2020. Yeah.
Yeah, and what a year it was, hey?
Yeah, great, yeah.
Nothing happened, everything was fine.
Everything was fine, yeah.
It's going to be a bit of a weird one. My top 10's been, well, I've kind of nicked a few ones that potentially came out actually in 2019, but I've gone for the main release date as being 2020.
Yeah.
So absolutely. A couple of mine crossover, because I realised I have not been to the cinema at all this year. I had planned to go.
Wow.
Because they had the release of the new Invisible Man that I was really excited to see. And then everything kind of like locked down from then on. And we were all looking forward to a Quiet Place 2, weren't we? That was imminently coming out. And then it all just kind of stopped from there.
Yeah.
And I haven't been since. You managed to make it out a couple of times, didn't you?
Yes, yeah. The last thing I saw at the cinema before the first lockdown was The Hunt, which was actually really fun, which is the kind of politically charged version of The Most Dangerous Game, with some mad kills, actually. Do watch The Hunt when you get a chance, because it is worth watching. It was unfortunate because it came out, I think, in the UK the very week we went into the lockdown or something like that, very close to it. And we caught it before that happened. I mean, it was a year when the horror films that we were looking forward to, like A Quiet Place 2, Halloween Kills, the new Saw movie, which looks really good, Candyman remake, Antlers. There's a whole bunch of them that are still on the shelf, in fact.
Yep.
No sign of any of them obviously some weird stuff's going on. I mean, the whole kind of cinema experience has changed and may never be the same again. With Disney is releasing some of their major films straight to Disney Plus in America. HBO Max are taking on loads of films instead of releasing them at cinemas, including massive ones like I think Black Widow is one of them. So the business has changed massively. Universal as well, even toyed, I think, for a time of releasing James Bond straight streaming. So because the big markets, I mean, America especially, as we know, while the UK has a massive problem right now with something happening out in the big world, but America, of course, so much of America is shut down, and especially the cinemas. So, yeah, weird year, and festivals didn't happen. Or festivals, actually, in fairness, were online, which I quite liked. And both of us experienced at least some of that each. So the viewing experience was at home, really, which changed things up in, forced to stay at home in extreme comfort, not necessarily a bad thing, as long as you were healthy and your family was healthy. I think that might be a nice memory to take away from this year. It certainly was from this end. Obviously, interacting with real people is somewhat missed, but there we go. As a year for TV and Netflix and things like that, obviously, were massively important to a lot of people, including us. But yeah, very strange indeed. So yeah, I mean, we're in the UK, so as Sarah said, these movies, as far as we were concerned, are 2020 movies. But I know on my list, I think at least a couple would have been shown at festivals or even released in their native country, like last year or something. But
yeah,
that's just the way it goes. So yeah, 10 films. It was actually hard. I found it quite tricky because I did think, so it's every year, but I did think that this year there was some really interesting stuff coming out. And the great thing, I suppose, if there is anything great about this year, is that in the lack of going to the cinema, it led people, including me, to watch stuff I might not have watched otherwise, which turned out to actually be really good. So, and Shudder and other streaming services are a part of that, because they were really pulling out all the stops, as we suggested, and releasing a lot of cool, interesting stuff from around the world that probably would have played at festivals otherwise, or maybe not. Who knows?
Yes, they have definitely been the saving grace. And yeah, my list is different. I mean, Stephen always says like pretty much every film he's seen is like the best horror movie I've seen this year. And then I always say every year, I haven't hardly seen any. And then I go through my list and I realise that I have actually seen quite a few. And Stephen can actually manage to sort his list out, because they're not all at number one.
Oh God, yeah. Oh God. Yeah, no, absolutely. No, that's cracking. It's good to have diverse lists. I don't know if there's any crossover this year, but I always like when we pick different things. It's nice when you have a shared one, like, oh yeah, you liked, Jeff Goes to the Moon or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's cool. That's why we talk about this stuff, because we all got different thoughts. We often agree on stuff, but it's great that someone got something out of a film that you maybe didn't. So yeah. So let's do it. Sarah, why don't you start us off with your number 10?
My number 10. Okay, my number 10 is a screener that I was given for Grimfest, and it's Anonymous Animals. I think I may have mentioned this a couple of times. It's a French kind of art house, but not too art house, as in it has no dialogue whatsoever. It's based on a subject that's very close to my heart, which is animal abuse. So it's animals getting their own back on humans, and it's really well done. Stunning scenery, fantastic stuff. Couple of things are possibly a little bit glitchy, but it's made it onto my top 10. And if you want to read my review, you can always check it out on the Horror Screams Video Vault website.
Yeah, I like the sound of Anonymous Animals. Actually, I haven't seen it, but it sounds well cool.
Really good.
It's quite short, isn't it? Is it like
It is just over an hour, I think. So not too much of a slog. Hold your attention. Brilliant stuff.
That's great. I mean, the interesting thing, I suppose, about what's happened, and maybe it was happening anyway in the media world, but these days, we saw it with TV shows, like on Netflix. A TV series can have episodes of different lengths, like, one episode can be an hour, 35 minutes, which is what we found with things like Mindhunter. Mm-hmm. Which is great, because they're not like beholden to like a formula for every episode's an hour. Oh shit, I've not got enough story for an hour. Let's just stretch this out. Like, I don't know, an extended Coronation Street or something. But yeah, there's a movie on my list which is an hour long, and I think that, who said that a film has to be 100 minutes? Why not?
Definitely not.
Tell your story and see how long it takes, and that's it.
If it's effective, then it doesn't matter how long it is. I mean, that's why we like short movies so much.
Yeah.
Some short movies can be just as effective
Absolutely.
as a feature length. Like Cargo is a perfect example.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes I prefer the short horror. Sometimes horror works best in a short format. Like
sure.
Anthology films, and we've just spoken about Creepshow, which obviously is essentially a horror film every week, but it's 45 minutes or an hour or something. So yeah, that's cool. My number 10, which is a festival watch as well, and something I think I spoke about on the show a few months ago, and is, I think, on the website Horror Screams as well, is The Swerve, which I really liked. Which I suppose, when you look at some of these films on my list, they kind of feel more relevant given what the year it's been. But of course, these films are already made, or at least in production when stuff happened. So you can't say that they were inspired by the events of this year. But it feels entirely appropriate that we had films like The Swerve, which is a film about someone that's downtrodden and abused at home. We don't know the true impact that this year has on people like the character in The Swerve, but you can imagine it's horrific. This is, there were two films that were competing for a place in my top 10, especially, which was this and Rent-A-Pal. Rent-A-Pal, which is fantastic and funnier than The Swerve, which isn't funny at all. But Rent-A-Pal is just as tragic, really. I mean, Rent-A-Pal, we talked about on the podcast, which is got Will Wheaton in it, and is essentially a story of the old cliche of the 40-year-old virgin, but in that case, a tragic story that's also tragically funny, about a guy that still lives with his mother and rents out this tape with Will Wheaton trying to help him through life. But The Swerve is brilliant too. It's a psychological horror film, I would say, and maybe you could compare it to things like Repulsion, or if you've watched Requiem for a Dream, maybe you'd compare it to what happens to the mum in that film, which is pretty harrowing. And it's got a great turn from Azura Sky, who's so good in this. And she's basically a high school teacher. She's got this family where no one's talking to each other. She's just stuck in the routine. She's taken advantage of. Her husband's a bit of a dick and is probably having an affair. And she's haunted by an accident that killed someone where she had to swerve on the road, which may or may not have happened. There's a degree of uncertainty in The Swerve about whether she's just having a breakdown or whether all of this stuff is real. But there's such a sense of the cruelty that she's had in life, including some bullying from her sister and all this stuff that's going on at work as well. It's really, really good. It's not a conventional horror film, but it is horrifying, and it's a total downer. So there's absolutely no joy in The Swerve, which is why I chose it as my number 10. It's well worth watching, though. Please do watch it. It was shown at Fright Fest, and I think it's on Amazon Prime to rent. I think that's the case.
Cool.
What's your number 9?
My number 9 is one that I watched earlier on in the year, and it is Blood Quantum.
Oh, okay.
It's my first of the zombie movies in my top 10 list. All the rest of them are zombie movies. Cool. I'm joking. Some of them might be zombie movies. Yeah, I mean, this one kind of came out a little bit out of nowhere. I didn't hear about it in the run up to it or anything. I just kind of heard a few murmurings, like, oh, check it out. Watched it. Yeah, really, really enjoyed it. Slightly different to the norm. It's about a bunch of indigenous kind of people in Canada at a reserve, and a zombie outbreak hits, but it only affects white people. So they don't actually get infected. They can still get killed by the zombies and stuff, so there's still quite a lot of threat going on, and it's basically a kind of do they don't they take in other people, that kind of stuff. It's quite humorous. There's some good zombies, some great kills. The ending goes a little bit awry, but we forget about that. That's my number 9.
That's cool. And what's that called, sir?
Blood Quantum.
Blood Quantum. Where do you find that? That's on something. I think I've seen the title somewhere.
I feel like I saw that on Prime.
Yeah.
Or was it Netflix? It might have been Netflix.
That sounds quite cool, actually.
What's your number 9?
Number 9. Usually, not always, I don't think, but usually there's a featured documentary in my top 10, which I think is okay. I think if it's connected to the horror genre, I think there's no reason why we can't have such a thing. And of course, it's our top 10, so we can do whatever we like.
Yes.
Which is why my number 1 is Jingle Jangle, the Netflix Christmas musical. I'll be talking about that soon. You're welcome. So number 9 is really a great documentary. It's Scream Queen, My Nightmare on Elm Street. So this, I think, is on Shudder, but the USA version, which I somehow managed to watch due to some witchcraft where it worked on my computer. I'm not quite sure how it happened, actually.
It's good
Probably
when that
illegal.
happens.
Yeah. So this is great. So we had a lot of documentaries this year about like individual horror movies or about stars or fans, like Hail to the Deadites is one we talked about on here. And this is really a bit of all three. Like, this is about horror movie, it's about one particular star, and it's also about the fans as well to a degree. And it's basically about Mark Patton, who was the lead of Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, which is a fascinating film. I mean, it's since been kind of viewed as a queer film. It does have a very obviously gay leading character played by a gay leading man. Although it's not, it's not said outright in the film, but it's a film in which, he's not that interested in his girlfriend. He wants to spend time with his best friend, and Freddy Krueger is desperate to literally get inside his body. So it has a lot of other things like phallic snakes and male locker room scenes rather than the usual girl ones, and bulges in jeans from the 80s, So there's all sorts of reasons why it's now viewed quite affectionately, I have to say, as a gay film. But this is a quite powerful documentary because it's about how miserable Mark Patton's experience was as a result of being in Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2. And this is in the context of Hollywood in the 80s, where everyone was paranoid about AIDS, and there was a massive witch hunt, of course, against gays. So it's really powerful. I mean, it shows how Patton had a total breakdown amongst other tragic things that happened in his life, and basically to actually have any kind of acting career was essentially required to play straight. Otherwise, he was totally shagged. Not in that way either. And it's also got it. Basically, the whole premise of the documentary is that he's haunted, and he just cannot kind of close this door in his life until he confronts the writer of the film, because the writer of the film famously said that Patton had ruined the film by making it a, quote, gay movie, when in fact, when you see people like Robert Englund in the documentary talking, they're saying, oh, actually, all the stuff was in the script. There was no subtext here. It was obvious what we were doing. It was all deliberate. So it's really interesting. I mean, Mark Patton's a really funny, interesting guy. He's been through a huge amount. It's a great insight into Hollywood, I think, not a very flattering one. And it reminds us, really, there's some clips that are shown that remind us of how, hey, in the 80s, you could watch a family film and they'd routinely use the word faggot, or you could turn on a stand-up routine by Eddie Murphy where he's trotting out these awful homophobic gags. So, I mean, it has a kind of, I'd say, an optimistic outcome, but it also reminds you that this stuff hasn't gone away. So there's a bit where Mark Patton talks about being trolled by hateful people on the internet that are doing the same thing that was happening in the 80s. So yeah, I thought this was great. I mean, if you love Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2 especially, you'll get something out of it. But I think even if you don't, it's just a fascinating insight into our genre, but also the people in it. So yeah, Scream Queen with a comma, Scream, comma, Queen. My Nightmare on Elm Street. It's number 9.
Nice.
It's fairly good.
My number 8 is one that we've mentioned before, and one that I'm still not entirely sure I'm pronouncing correctly, so I'm going to give it 2 names. It was one we watched on Shudder, Impetigore or Impetigore.
Oh, I still haven't seen this.
Still not entirely sure how you pronounce it either.
I don't know.
We don't know. An Indonesian / South Korean kind of supernatural, but also kind of cursy, witchy, great kind of stuff that gives you some twists. You think it's going to be about a haunted house. It turns out to be nothing of the sort. Very, very good. I think it's still on Shudder.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
And I have reviewed it, but I'm not sure if it's up yet. But check it out.
Yeah, I quite like the sound of this. I haven't seen it yet, but Impetigore. Is it?
We'll go with that. That's what we're calling it from now on. Impetigore.
It's official. You heard it here. There's a bunch of Indonesian stuff or Indonesian horror stuff on Netflix as well, isn't there? There's quite a lot. I have watched some of it. Like I watched May the Devil Take You, and then the sequel, May the Devil Take You Too, which is not you
Clever.
too, as in Bono. Well, I wish they fucking would.
Oh yeah, that would be amazing.
no,
I'd love that
U2.
film.
I don't want to say that U2 are the most horrific thing. No, maybe they're not actually. The coronavirus is slightly worse.
Wow.
Actually, Bono, coronavirus. Wait a minute. I think I've changed my mind. Anyway, yeah, those, you see, May the Devil Take You and the sequel are really formulaic. Like you're basically watching a Hollywood jump scare movie, but it's in Indonesian. So hang on. This is the same as Annabelle Part 7. But there are some really good ones. And Impet Igor thing sounds good.
It's a good one. Whatever
Nice.
it is, watch it. You'll never find out how to pronounce it.
Yeah, no one needs to know that. You don't have to ask for it at the cinema anymore. You
No,
can just watch it.
exactly. Yeah.
That was always the embarrassing thing, wasn't it? Like at the cinema, and you get to the desk, you're like, "Oh, could I have 2 for the Shipshank Rhododendron? Do you need the Shawshank Redemption?" Yes.
That's it. Yeah, just check. Just testing. I know how to speak.
It's great. My number 8, actually, we've already spoken about, which is the fantastic "Why Don't You Just Die?"
Yay!
Which, I could have put a higher. I was struggling with the order, but yeah, it's one of the best of the year. Either way, it's way up. Fantastic.
Love that film. That didn't make it into my list though. Now I feel bad.
It's strange, isn't it? Yeah, I saw it quite early, so I had to be reminded of it actually to remember to put it in there because I was I remember it being great, but then I started thinking about it and thought, oh, that was really good.
Yeah, it was really, 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 really good.
Right.
Yay! Okay, my number 7 is surprise, surprise, a zombie movie.
Hey,
It's the film that kicked off Fright Fest Online, and it is Sky Sharks.
excellent.
I had to make it into my list. Who does not love zombies or Nazi zombies on flying sharks? With a bit of Tony Todd.
Bit of Tony Todd and who else was somebody else? Was it not Ellen DeGeneres? It was someone else.
No, not sure.
Some other celebrity-ish. Oh yeah, I can't remember now. Oh, that's good, Buffy. Yeah, Sky Sharks, which is that film at Fright Fest where a bunch of people took it too seriously and were total knobs on the message boards.
And got really offended by it.
This film's like really like sexist, like it's got like loads of nudity and sex and stuff, and I mean it's got sharks in the sky.
Yeah, it does have an awful lot of boobs, but that does not matter. It's still a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought that they forgot it was a film called Sky Sharks and were expecting something a little different. Ah dear, ho hum.
Yeah, who knows?
Oh, we
It's
don't care
great.
because it's fun. Yeah,
It's in my top 10.
That's cool. I'm glad you chose that. Actually, it deserves a bit of love. I don't know if it's got a release yet. Actually, I haven't seen.
No, I haven't heard anything more about it. But that's how it all started, wasn't it? I mean, we were hearing about this about 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And then it all went really quiet, and then all of a sudden they're like, Sky Sharks is back. Yes. So they'll do the same with the
It's had a
DVD
long
release. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, Sky Sharks. Check it out when it comes your way. My number 7, we mentioned it, and it's really, really good. And it was before The Hunt. I think it was the second to last film I saw at the cinema, and it's The Invisible Man, which I really loved. Actually, and it's a real shame because this, I think it made a lot of money, but it kind of was shut down by the coronavirus.
Yeah.
But it is a great cinema film for a couple of reasons that I won't really say because it would spoil it. But this was a great surprise because, it's maybe not a surprise because Lee Winnell made it, and Lee Winnell's really good. So Lee Winnell co-created Saw. He did a brilliant film called Upgrade, which you should watch if you haven't already.
No.
Which is a kind of RoboCop-ish, futuristic, kind of gory sci-fi thing, which is really
cool.
awesome. Got some great action in it, and he made this, and this is good because it came along at the right time because Universal were going to make their big old Dark Universe, which was basically digging up the bones of their classic monster movies and remaking them. And the first one of those turned out to be The Mummy with Tom Cruise, which was a total bag of shit.
Oh, God.
Painful film. And that destroyed the whole plan to remake things like Bride of Frankenstein and all that. However, Lee Winnell basically pitched a low-budget version of The Invisible Man that wouldn't have loads of CGI and would actually be good for a change. So this kind of came out before the plague hit, and this is really good. I mean, we were talking about how bad Black Christmas is in attempting to kind of address serious issues, and this does that because it's ultimately a story of an abused wife, played brilliantly by Elizabeth Moss, who is always good. Mm-hmm. But it does it in a way that also works as a really good horror film, and it's not patronizing. It's actually really boldly unsentimental. Like Elizabeth Moss looks and feels like an abused wife. She's not necessarily always that sympathetic, but she's been through so much, so you're obviously rooting for her. And it's her husband that becomes the Invisible Man, so the horrifying idea is that she runs away from him, but he finds her back so he can stalk her all over again, but while invisible. So yeah, the abuse continues in possibly the most distressing way possible. And it's great. I mean, it's really, really scary. You're constantly sensing that he's in a scene when he might not be. And it has you looking in the corner, especially. It'll work on the TV, I think, but especially in the cinema, you're looking at this massive frame and there's a sense of his presence. And I would say that, I mean, a lot of the Hollywood films, I'm always moaning about jump scares, but this has two scares or two shocks. I don't know which way you see them, but that are two of the best I've seen in the cinema. They really worked so well. The guy I went to see it with practically shat his pants, which is not but they're done so well, and there's one moment which comes so out of the blue that you're like, wow. Invisible Man is awesome, and it did really well, which I was really pleased about. And she's just one of the best actors around at the moment, Elizabeth Moss. So that's awesome. So check it out.
That is one of my regrets of the year, I think, not going to see that.
Who'd have known, eh? Yeah.
I mean, even from watching the trailer creeps me out. So, it's good to hear that the rest of the film, goes along those lines and it's not ruined by the trailer or anything. So, yeah, is that out?
Yes, it's out on Blu-ray for sure. It's out to rent if you have Sky, it's on Sky.
Okay, cool.
Sky Movies or whatever it's called, yeah.
I need to see it.
Lovely. Yeah.
Nice. My number 6. My number 6 is one that we've already mentioned. Surprise, surprise. It's zombies. It's Train to Busan presents Peninsula. Is my number 6. Yes.
Excellent. Nice.
Don't need to mention it again. I enjoyed it that much. It made it to number 6.
That's cool, man. Jolly good show. And that one is available on DVD.
It is indeed.
In the UK at least. So that's cool. My number 6, which, tricky this, isn't it? Trying to get like films and stuff in a number and order and stuff. But my number 6 is, I think I mentioned it on the podcast, Little Joe. Oh, Little Joe.
Oh, yep. Yes. And the kind of Little Shop of Horrors type thing.
Yeah, without the songs.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is something that really creeped me out. And the fact that it's not necessarily one I'd have always thought would have made it to the top 10, but the fact that is I often think about and think, "Oh, Little Joe," with those words, like, and that tone, "Oh," it really creeped me out, and it stays with you. So I think for that reason, it has to be in there. And I kept twiddling with the numbers and thinking, no, it's better than that. I mean, on paper, it sounds like, really, yeah, but actually, it's really good. I mean, basically, Ben Whishaw, voice of Paddington Bear, is in charge of a breeding program, and he's created this, or he's helped create with genetic engineering this crimson flower, and the idea is that it's got a scent that will make its owners happy. So it's been crafted artificially as the world's first proper official antidepressant plant. So you keep it happy, watering it and stuff, and it'll keep you happy. Not in that way. And gradually, though, of course, you realize that something's really wrong, and people that are breathing it in, breathing the pollen in, something's being triggered in the brain. People are changing, but changing in a really subtle way. So this is I think it's a 12 rated film because nothing gory happens, but it's extremely creepy because you can tell stuff is changing. People are not acting like themselves. So there's a bit of the body snatchers in there. There's some nice humor where a guy being interviewed, who was one of the test subjects when they were testing out the plants, knows that something's wrong with his wife because she no longer moans at him for not doing the washing up and shit like that. So it's got a sense of humor, but it's extremely unsettling, and it's shot in this very chilly way, these very slow kind of long pans, and this very clinical visual style that it has, which is really good. And it's also got a very deliberately annoying sound design where the plant kind of seems to be controlling the film with this shrill sound that's on the score a lot, on the soundtrack rather. So yeah, I love this. I mean, it's interesting to watch it this year because it does have scenes of people being really paranoid about each other's health. It has scenes of people saying things like, "Oh, we're all going to have to wear face masks," you know. So again, it accidentally became really topical, even though it was obviously, I think it was released, or it was going to be released before the lockdown, and then it came out on streaming. But Little Joe, which is a British co-production with a couple of other countries, is really good. If you're into, you know, that kind of deliberately paced, creepy, drip feed, slow burn, dread horror.
I was then about to say, is it more of a kind of slower type one?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, very little sort of seems to happen, but at the same time, everything has changed.
Yeah. Cool.
Oh,
well, we're at number 5 now.
God blimey, yeah, the year is flying by.
Going through it. Okay, my number 5 is another South Korean movie which features some zombies. It's #Alive.
Oh, yeah, I remember this one. I haven't seen this one either. Right.
No, it's another really good one. It's about a guy who's trapped in an apartment during a zombie virus, and he and another female survivor who he notices in the opposite building have to try and escape, find a way out, get rescued, that type of thing. It's not quite as ferocious and as relentless as some of them have been, like, say, Peninsula, or the name's gone out of my head of it. The other kind of, like, One Cut of the Dead, even though that's not necessarily a zombie movie as such, because it's kind of a film within a film within a film. You know, it doesn't have any of those kind of changes. It kind of is what it is. It plods along as it is. It's still entertaining and funny, and the zombies are really good. You know, it's still my number 5. They've made a US version of it, came out pretty much also this year, called Alone. So if you don't like subtitles, watch Alone. But I haven't seen that one.
So that's a remake.
I don't know if it's necessarily a remake, as they both came out at the same time, but it's pretty much the same film.
Yeah, sure. Wow, man. Okay, and that's #Alive.
Yeah.
Cool. Is it like a better than average year for zombie films? Has it been like more
You would
strong?
think so. Yeah, you would think so. And I am not done on the zombies either.
There's more coming, though.
There is more coming. Oh, yeah. You kind of they creep up on you. The zombie movies do. It's always good. Trickle feeding zombie movies throughout the year. It's great.
Is there any big zombie movie coming? I know that the cinemas and stuff is tricky, but is there a major one that's
I haven't heard of anything coming up recently. It was all about Peninsula.
What happened to World War Z 2? Wasn't that?
It keeps appearing and then disappearing. It's all kind of more about your series and stuff now. You've got all the Walking Dead spin-offs and the potential of Black Summer 2 coming out soon.
Yes, of course,
Movie-wise, I've not heard anything, but that doesn't mean anything. I'm very slow on the uptake, so there probably is something going on. I just haven't heard about it yet.
Yeah. And well, it's strange, isn't it? Yeah, and there's also been a few things that have just appeared, haven't there? Like that was kind of being worked on in secret. So that's always possible. Oh, that's interesting. I would imagine this time we'll we've kind of seen it a little bit, but I imagine we'll see more zombie films or more apocalypse films, virus infection movies. But there were already loads anyway, wasn't there? So maybe we'll see some different style of maybe more somber kind of things. Who knows? Number 5. So I think I mentioned this one on the old podcast as well, but my number 5 is a British film called His House, which premiered on Netflix. I think it's a BBC co-production. It's got Matt Smith in it for a little role. And this is really powerful. This is another kind of, I suppose, emotionally driven horror film. It's about a husband and wife, Sudanese refugees that come to England, and they're followed from their home country by what's called a night witch, or an apith. The husband doesn't really believe her. They've been through a lot. They've lost a child while crossing the channel to get to this country and be put up in a miserable house. But through the course of the film, we come to believe her. And it's a really powerful film. I mean, it's as much about the awful and nightmarish refugee experience as it is the night witch, although the night witch is pretty terrifying, played by Javier Botet, who has done so many of those creepy characters because he's so tall and so thin.
He's a creepy guy.
He really is, yeah. There is some jump scares. I think there's a pigeon scare or a bird scare early on, but not many. There is some more kind of conventional horror movie stuff, and there's some great visuals. But I think the biggest thing about it is these very sympathetic characters who've fled from a war zone and find, I suppose, a combination of casual everyday racism and supernatural horror in this new home. I thought it was really powerful. I really liked it, and it's extremely well acted. And it's called His House, number 5.
Nice. Okay, my number 4 is another one that was mentioned. The Mortuary Collection.
Oh yeah, that's good.
It's that good an anthology with the lovely Clancy Brown that it's made it all the way to number 4 on my list. I love a good anthology, and as you say, I mean, some of them are kind of questionable, but once you come across the odd one or two, you could kind of stick to it. And I could watch that several times over.
Yeah, it does have a rewatchability, that one, doesn't it?
Yes.
I like that one a lot. That's really cool. Yeah, that's on Shudder, isn't it?
Yes, it is, yes.
Oh, Shudder. Just going to stop a moment and count the royalties. We just got another check from Shudder, so I'm just going to see.
Oh, nice!
Now, yeah, that's.
I was going to say there might be a few more in the post as well before the night is out.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah, we keep them going. Good. So that's enough to get some scones. Excellent. So, which is obviously better. So number 4 for me. Oh, it's very very tight at the top. But number 4 is something I watched just last week, and it's Possessor, which is great. Which is now to rent on Prime. I think it's getting a proper like Blu-ray release in February or something like that. This played at the London Film Festival and is directed by Brandon Cronenberg, who is indeed David Cronenberg's son. So obviously he's not making fluffy bunny films. He's making films like Possessor, which is very disturbing. So this is really great. I mean, this is, I suppose, a kind of horror sci-fi crossover. And it's basically about this secret organization that specializes in these very high-tech brain implants, which means that their agents, and one of them is Andrea Riseborough, can control the actions and control the bodies of people that they choose to be assassins. So they're picking random people to be assassins so they can control them to do the assassination and then have them killed off so they get away with it. So it's very, very chilly, this film. I mean, the main character has a family, but her job has got to the point where she's losing touch a bit with reality. It's messing with her mind. Her kills or assassinations have become more savage, even though they don't need to be because she's given a gun, but she starts stabbing people a lot instead. And she's now got to the stage where before she goes back to her family, she has to rehearse what she's going to say to them before she goes inside, which I'm sure we maybe all do sometimes. And yeah, I mean, it basically gets to a point where she gets a new contract to assassinate a prominent person in this big data mining company that's basically spying on people's bedrooms so they can try and sell them new curtains. And it ends up with a very horrific scene with none other than Sean Bean.
Love him.
So, and he's great. I mean, he's playing this awful...
He's always great.
He's fantastic, yeah. He's playing this horrible human being, this CEO of the big company who's already bored of the thing that made him a fortune, you know. It's really well acted. I mean, this is again a real downer. It's absolutely hopeless. There's no way that a mainstream audience would sit through the ending without going, "Oh, Jesus Christ!" You know. But it's great. It's set in Toronto. Toronto looks really chilly and unpleasant. It's got some real hardcore violence in it, and it's all about, I suppose, the dehumanization of the modern world. It's got this kind of high-tech sweatshop where one of the characters works in and spying on people for a living. I suppose it's got a black sense of humor, but it's pretty intense and really well acted. So yeah, Possessor will tick your box for gore and give you a tough time.
Yeah, it's getting a lot of attention at the moment, and I'm hearing a lot of good things about it.
Yeah, it's so good, man. You have to watch it. It's definitely up there.
Nice. My number 3, top 3 now. Awesome.
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
My number 3 is something that we mentioned earlier that may be showing on Shudder, is Creepshow, the animated show. So it's the one that they showed over Halloween. which was absolutely fantastic. It just featured 2 stories, and as I say, it's all animated, but it's not like a kids show at all. There is like serious violence and swearing and all sorts of stuff going on in here. And the stories were written. There is a short story written by Stephen King, which is called Survivor Type, and that is voiced by none other than Kiefer Sutherland. And it's basically just him. In this, he's been stranded on a island. I'm not sure if it's like a plane crash or something like that, and pretty much everyone else died. But it's not like a nice desert island or anything. It's basically just a rock in the ocean, and it's just him slowly going crazier and crazier with the lack of food and dehydration and arguments with seagulls and stuff. Really, 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 really amazing artwork and animation. I really enjoyed it. And then the second story was written by Joe Hill.
Nice.
And it's called Twittering from the Circus of the Dead. So it's got zombies in it, which is always a good thing. Which brings my total to about 8, I think, in my list. And, you know, animated zombies are cool because they can make them look gruesome and gory and just so animated and just extra special. It's kind of about a family that are traveling in a car and they get lost and they come across a circus in the middle of the desert. And the family kind of like gets recruited by the circus and they don't quite realise exactly what's going on. It's kind of told from the point of view of the young girl who's obsessed with her phone and like constantly tweeting what's going on and stuff without actually realizing what's happening to her and her family towards the end. It's really, really good. Great fun, great little Halloweeny thing, and I really want them to do some more. I wasn't too sure on the Creep in the series that came out, but animated Creep is cool.
Oh yeah, the Creep, yeah. He's an animatronic in the series, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And he didn't talk in the series, did he, from memory?
No. He does talk a bit in the intros to the animated one.
Yeah. I always liked the Creep in the original film. Maybe that was it. Yeah. Okay, cool. I need to give that a watch. That was something I forgot to watch.
Yeah, it's really good fun. They need to do more. So I'm getting really into animation stuff at the moment.
Yeah, there's some good stuff for sure. Creepshow, I suppose they could actually do a kind of kid-friendly version, couldn't they? There's the scope there, maybe, to do that.
Definitely, but that for adults is it's just up there with the movies and stuff. Who needs masses of like real blood and stuff when you can draw it in the animation? It comes across just as effective.
Yeah, wonderful. So that's the Creepshow animated special, and double bill with the holiday special would be quite good, wouldn't it? Hour and a half.
It would be good, yeah, exactly.
Nice. So the top 3, so I had a bit of trouble with the order of this stuff, so in the end came up with something. So number 3 for me is Host.
Ooh.
Which I really loved, actually. And this was another lockdown affair. And this is unique because, of course, it's the movie quite famously now that was shot in lockdown, during the UK lockdown, at least in spring of 2020. The director, Rob Savage, didn't meet his actors. They were kind of in charge of their own effects and stuff when they were doing their bit. And the whole movie is set on a Zoom call, which became, I guess, the backdrop for people's workplace this year, and for a lot of people, including me, actually. So it's set around an all too familiar scenario, really. And in this case, though, the people involved create an online seance that obviously goes terribly wrong. And I just thought this was really good. It's an hour long, or just under an hour. It's got humour. It's got characters that I actually quite liked, which you don't always get on these laptop-based things like Unfriended. There's a few movies like this that have come out, isn't there? And the earliest one I can remember is a Skype-based one called The Collingswood Story, which I think is about boyfriend and girlfriend, and that's genuinely quite creepy as well. But yeah, this I think did everything right. I mean, there's probably not that much original about some of the jump scares. There's a couple that are sort of borrowed from Paranormal Activity. The idea is very similar to Ghostwatch in terms of like a seance using new technology that hijacks people in different locations. But it's so well done, and I think it will be remembered as a really important horror film because it's the horror film of 2020, really, isn't it? It's got all the references to the coronavirus and people people going out with masks on, or people referencing. Oh, there's a great false scare where there's a creepy sound that turns out to be the shopping delivery coming for the medium. That's leading to say, oh, I guess we're Tesco shopping. And it's got great scares. I mean, there's the scare with I think it's the Snapchat filter or the screensaver or both, in fact.
No, that is it. Yeah, the deaths and stuff. The girl like ends up smashing her face into the desk, and then it just goes to her loop of her screensaver. It totally creeped me out, man. And the girl getting pulled back in her chair. Simple little things like that. I absolutely shat myself.
It's so good.
I went into watching that film all blasé, like, this isn't going to be nothing. It's just going to be, I'm not going to appreciate this at all. And my other half, who's not a massive horror fan, sat and watched it with me. And by the end, we were like, looked at each other and like, that was awesome. It was so good. I did crap myself on various occasions watching that.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, absolutely. I watched it too with my girlfriend, who often is looking at her phone and stuff during these things, or just not watching. It was like, oh god, what is this from 1972? Yes, actually 71 actually. And she was well into it. She actually, for the very last scare, she actually dropped her wine all over herself. And that was kind of the position I was in. I would never obviously waste wine like that, but I remember when it finished, I was really sweaty, even though it wasn't that. So I was just kind of almost stuck to my chair because it was so intense. It's really good. It really is so good.
It is really good.
And they crammed so much into an hour, but had it been longer, I think it would have been stretching it. So they knew exactly, how long to give this thing. And maybe that's the problem of a lot of the found footage stuff, is it's just doesn't an hour and a half. But this was just a really good, basically a modern ghost story using the most up-to-date stuff. I think it'll be interesting to watch it in years to come. Like there'll be a stage, maybe not that far off, when the technology will really date it. It'd be like Zoom chat. What the hell, Granddad? But it will also be really important because it'll be, well, this was the year of the virus, and this is maybe the most.
This is what came out of it. Yeah.
It's cool to see that Rob Savage, I think, I don't know if it's a 3-picture deal, but he got a big deal with Blumhouse to make horror films for them as a result of Host, which of course cost nothing. Was made under the most unusual circumstances. So yeah, check out Host. It's been a massive hit, and it's getting, I think, a nice Blu-ray release next year. So you need to buy it.
Exciting. Yeah, I will do. And that is why Host is my number 2.
Oh, fantastic. It's just, I was going to, it was my number 1 for a long time, but I don't know. Is there any order to this really?
Yeah, I was toying, and you still haven't mentioned my number 1, which I think you might be mentioning soon. I'm not sure though.
Okay, cool. Right, where are we at? Oh, we're at number 2.
You're at number 2 now, because you've already done my number 2.
So to speak. I had a nightmare trying. There's a few films that I should have put in, but so ultimately, I suppose I thought about it and thought, okay, so Host, blah blah, Little Joe. What else am I still thinking about after all these months? And so my number 2 actually is The Lighthouse.
Okay.
Which I think is a horror film. I think it's a horror film about cabin fever, about 2 men going nuts in a lighthouse, unsurprisingly, and it's just really mental. And I saw this at the cinema, so this, I suppose, was one of the last things I saw at the cinema as well, January or February time. Willem Dafoe is an old guy, and Robert Pattinson is like, I suppose, his, I don't know what you call it really, his protege, his timberman that's attracted by the salary of being a lighthouse keeper, but doesn't reckon on being stuck there for months with another man. And they both go somewhat crazy. There's a mermaid that may or may not exist. There's a lot of dread. It's got a great soundtrack. It's by the director of The Witch, or The Vivitch, as it was called,
yay!
Which I loved.
Yes, I love that film.
This is just as good, and it's just as distinctive, and just as nightmarish in its own way. Although it's also very funny. I mean, they become like a twisted married couple in a strange way. It does also have the most nightmarish masturbation scene of all time. It's very Lovecraftian at times. I suppose it's influenced by Edgar Allan Poe. There's a degree of The Shining about it. There's a lot of really great insults, like curdled foreskin is one that springs to mind, which we've all been called at some stage. And it's just really grotesque and funny. It's just 2 people. It's just a 2-hander. So those 2 guys are awesome. And it looks like it's shot in black and white and square, so it looks like an old silent film. or like an old 19th century photograph or something.
Mm.
But I love this. It's very funny as well as being nightmarish. It's yeah, awesome. So Lighthouse is at number 2.
Yay! Yeah, I still haven't got around to watching that yet. I'm warming to it the more you talk about it, and I have seen some still shots and stuff from it, and I do like black and white. So
It looks beautiful.
maybe I should get over myself and watch it, because I'm not a massive Robert Pattinson fan.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. You need to check out. There's a video on YouTube that my friend pointed in my direction, which was Robert Pattinson, sort of in a very overt fashion, slating his experience on the Twilight movies. But of course, they made him a star, and then he was able to choose his own stuff, and now he's popping up in all sorts of weird roles, usually as perverts or nutcases and things like this. The Devil All the Time. He was a pedo preacher. He's a really strong actor. I think he's a great choice for the Batman, which is probably coming out at some stage. But yeah, he's worked for David Cronenberg a couple of times as well. So he's made some really cool stuff. But The Lighthouse is something else.
Okay, cool. Right, we're on to the final ones.
Oh, I see.
Need a little drum roll. Okay, so my number 1 is a Belgian movie that appeared on Shudder, and it's called Yummy.
Oh, that was great. Yes, that was good. Yeah.
It's like the best film I've seen in a long time. So hilarious, so gory, lots and lots of zombies, lots of ridiculous situations with a tragic and really sweet, sad ending. It's about a couple that travel to a dodgy Eastern European hospital. So the girlfriend can have a breast reduction, and they take along her mother because she wants a few bits and bobs as well. And just as she's about to go under the knife, her boyfriend has a little bit of a panic attack about it, and then gets taken off around the hospital by one of the orderlies, and they inadvertently come across a kind of zombie-like woman tied to a table, although they didn't realise she's an undead person at the time, and kind of just let her go a little bit, and it just escalates from there, really. Just carnage all the time. Some really humorous bits about a guy that has a penis enlargement, and some great one-liners, some great kills, some hilarious dialogue. It's got everything. It's really, really funny. It kind of popped up and then disappeared again, which is quite sad.
Yeah, it's really good, isn't it?
I haven't seen it since. It seems to have disappeared, but it was on Shudder, so hopefully you can still find it somewhere.
Yeah, that's a good point, and that's maybe why I sort of forgot about it. But yeah, Yummy is really good. It has that feel of just going over the line of things like Reanimated, doesn't it? Which and humour.
Dead Snow, that kind of humour to it and stuff. Yeah.
But like you said, though, one of the surprises about it is that just when you think you know the sort of tone it has, it does shift, and you're like, and it has that more serious side, which becomes more apparent in the second half. Yeah, I like Yummy a lot. That's well worth seeing. In any other kind of scenario, I think that would have got more attention, or it would have been like a cult film that people were talking about. Certainly a film that would have played well at festivals, if I guess it didn't. Yeah. With an audience. That's a cool choice. Yummy. Yeah, excellent. And that's somewhere. It was another Shudder joint. Cool. Well, my number 1 actually is something feels like I was talking about just really recently, and probably because I haven't. It was just a few weeks ago that I saw it, and I think it's had to really be my number 1 because it was so powerful. Which is Relic, which is the Australian film which we talked about before. Emily Mortimer. There's so many people called Emily. For a while I thought it was the same Emily that's in Little Joe, but that was Emily Beecham, and then I got confused with Emily Watson, who's someone else. And then there's, Emily Smith or whoever. But yeah, Emily Mortimer is the one from this. Oh, and what's the other one from A Quiet Place? Is that Emily Blunt?
It could be, yeah.
I think ultimately there's too many Emilys, so there's going to have to be a purge.
They're taking over from the Sarahs.
Yeah, a lot of Sarahs around.
In 80s and 90s movies, there was always a Sarah.
Yeah. And some movies have the word Sarah in the title, like Jack and Sarah with Richard E. Grant. Can't think of any others. That's probably the only one.
It might be the only one.
Sarah's choice out of Sophie's choice. Yeah.
Sarah of the Dead.
You could put Sarah into anything, actually. Yeah. That's it. Yeah. So yeah, Relic's really good. I mean, I banged on about it last time, but it's just a really powerful kind of effectively a haunted house movie, but filtered through what's really a story about dementia. It's very dark. It has that kind of tragic feel to it, like the end of The Fly or like the romance in The Fly, because it's all about watching your loved one getting very, very sick. And in this case, the sickness manifests itself as what would otherwise be seen as a normal supernatural kind of haunting. But it's really well done, and you come away from it absolutely, totally ruined and sad, but also creeped out. There's a lot of very creepy stuff in that very disturbing house that it's set. And it was one of a few really good films this year. Obviously, Black Christmas was a bad example, but one of a few really good films this year, directed by a woman, which was Natalie Erica James, who I think is her first film. Another great year for first filmmakers as well, like her and Rob Savage. So many of actually, I think the top 10 were the first film. Even things like The Lighthouse, it was only his second film. So a lot of newcomers on the block. And yeah, so that's cool. What a year, Sarah. Yeah, that was it. I mean, any ones that didn't make your list or just missed out?
Yeah, well, there was a couple. I wanted to mention Hail to the Deadites as well as the kind of documentary, and then there was also the Tom Savini documentary Smoke and Mirrors.
That was
I believe.
Great. Yep, that was really good.
That was a good one. I wanted to quickly. I didn't. Hall does not deserve to be on my list because I didn't find it that great, but it's definitely a slightly different take on a kind of infection zombie movie. So it's one to check out. Hall. I think that was a Fright Fest movie.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
On the same kind of lines as Relic, I watched a kind of indie film for another one screener to review for the website called The Tent, which is a very similar thing. It covers the story of dementia in a kind of way. It mentions there being a crisis. So the crisis of the world is dementia itself, which has hit this old guy, and he's living in a tent out in the woods. It's all kind of metaphorical and stuff, but it hits. It doesn't sound quite as creepy. It's definitely. I wouldn't say it was definitely as creepy as Relic, and it probably isn't quite as good. But it goes along those same kind of lines, and at the end of it, you do kind of feel like it's really got you in the feels, and you understand it. It was made from the heart, so that's good. It's called The Tent.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds really good.
And then I just had a couple of others that I wanted to mention from the Grimfest that are all up on the Horror Screams Video Vault website. And that's 12-Hour Shift and Death Ranch.
Oh, yeah. 12-Hour Shift was great.
Yeah, that was it for my special mentions.
Nice. Yeah, there was a lot of films, I think, this year, or horror films that were, like you suggest with The Tent, emotionally driven. Even The Invisible Man, is very much a character-driven thing. And it just works really well because the scares are so well kind of integrated into her story. So that's good that a lot of grown-up stories in horror at the moment. My one, Rent-a-Pal probably should have made it in there because it was so good. That's very funny but very tragic at the same time. A couple of eco-horror films. The Beach House was very creepy about this kind of parasitic thing on a very pretty stretch of beach, and Unearth, which is the one with Adrienne Barbeau and the horrors created by fracking. I really liked Sea Fever, which was a film with Dougray Scott, which I watched early in lockdown. Another sort of tale of isolation, very thingy, a thing like rather than thingy, John Carpenter thingy.
Cool.
That was creepy, and again, you didn't see much of it because it's a low budget film. That had a kind of Lovecraftian sort of underwater squid-like creature stuck to the boat and invading their bodies. That was really gruesome at times. It doesn't seem to get mentioned a lot either, but I think that's also on Sky. The Platform was really cool. That's a Netflix one, and that's a bit like Snowpiercer, really. It's about a platform of food that travels down to several floors, and obviously it starts off fantastic. You get a wonderful feast with the rich people, but by the time it gets to the poor people at the bottom, it's been pissed on, and you get the scraps and leftovers. Really gory and a great idea. I like that one. Chris Moore made another great film called Stranger Among the Living, which was really cool. Another witty kind of film from him after things like Triggered, which was very good. There was a movie called Triggered, not to be confused with Chris Moore's Triggered, which is a bit like a kind of cross between Saw and Battle Royale, really awesome. It was shown at Fright Fest, full of gore and well worth checking out, where a bunch of students are kind of held in a forest and they've each got their own suicide vest, and they basically have to kill each other to survive, and the last one standing wins their life, you know. And that's terrific. VFW was great. That's a really gory film with a lot of veteran actors like Martin Coe from The Karate Kid and William Sadler. A bit like Assault on Precinct 13, but set in a veterans bar. And one that I almost put in my top 10 for sheer entertainment and because I like a killer crocodile film, which is the great Thai film, The Pool.
Oh, yes.
So
I forgot all about that. Yeah, that's a brilliant film.
It was great. And there's not that many good killer crocodile films. And in fact, this year, Blackwater Abyss, which was one that wasn't very good, shows you it's a bit tricky sometimes to make these good.
Yeah. When was
Paul
Crawl?
kept on going. Crawl was last year. At the end, I think.
That was good, but silly at the same time.
Yeah. Crawl wasn't as good as The Pool. I thought The Pool top. It just kept on trucking, didn't it?
Yeah.
And there was a huge amount of like, what moments in The Pool.
Yeah. That poor dog.
The dog. It was also really funny. It actually really cheered me up because it was so suspenseful, but at the same time, it was like, what? And there was a film called Spiral, which I really liked, which is not to be confused with Spiral, which is the new Saw film that is still on the shelf. It was a good year. There was some good stuff out, actually. You had to look for it, but it was all out there, even if you were stuck at home.
Absolutely. It was a good year for series as well, because I think people had all cottoned on to the fact that we were spending more time at home watching movies. So why not make a few series up to go along with it? Keep you a little bit more entertained. I certainly got into several of them this year. Ooh, my cat's joining in, sorry. Hey, you. I got very into The Deadlands quite early on in the year. A kind of series based on the movie of the same name from 2014 about an ancient Maori tribe and an undead warrior that are trying to fight together to rescue people's souls. There's been a curse placed on the land, so the souls can't go to heaven, so they kind of come back as kind of zombie-like people. And it's funny, it's witty, it's silly, but it's also quite endearing as well.
Cool.
There was a whole 8 episodes on that. I also got really into Reality Z, which was the Brazilian version of Dead Set. Basically went along the same lines as Dead Set by Charlie Brooker, all the way through to the end, and then some. It went on off its own back and kind of made things up as it went along, but it turned out to be really great. I wasn't impressed with the first episode because I thought it was too much like Dead Set and they were trying to ruin the original, but as it goes along you realise that's not what they were trying to do at all. They're trying to big it up and use it as more of a tribute to take it somewhere else, and I think they did a really good job. That was a fabulous series.
Yeah, that's a tricky act to follow, isn't it?
It really is. And another thing that I've literally just finished that I'm probably going to get like really ragged on for is I've watched all 10 episodes of one of the spin-offs, The Walking Dead World Beyond.
Yes.
I wanted to watch it because I'd heard so many bad things about it. People were saying how it's just so badly written. The acting is terrible. I can't believe they're doing this. Blah, 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 blah. I was like, okay, I'm going to try this just out of spite.
Yeah.
And I actually thought it was all right. It's definitely not the same as The Walking Dead. It's kind of the same as The Walking Dead got from like series 7 onwards, I suppose,
Yeah.
But I found the story easy to follow. I thought they used the walkers really well, although they don't call them walkers in this. They call them empties, which is really weird. So used to them being called walkers. But it's set in a different world. It's set like 10 years on from the apocalypse, or possibly even more than that. It kind of follows a group of people that were small children when the outbreak happened. So they've grown up into their teens now and need to go off on their own on a quest to find their father and stuff. It's pretty good. I don't actually mind any of the kids. I think they're pretty good. A couple of the older actors are a bit dodgy, but I just kind of hope that they might kill them off at some point. But I'm going to stick with it. I thought it was pretty good.
Well, that's good because it did have that dodgy trailer, didn't it?
It does have very dodgy trailers. I thought it was going to be a pile of poo when I saw the trailer for it, but it's growing on me.
And maybe that it's set in that period, it means there won't be like an obvious crossover from the other shows.
Oh, I don't know. That's the thing. It's Scott Gimple, isn't it? I think he still will mess it up royally. I've already heard rumours that they're going to put Rick in it.
Wow. But how would that... Okay. Yeah.
Well, because Rick got taken away in a helicopter, and World Beyond is all about civilizations rebuilding, and there is the Civic Republic is the main power in this world, and they have helicopters, and they're in military, that kind of thing. So you could think that maybe the Civic Republic were the ones that took Rick away.
Got it.
So you could easily see how they could fit him in it. If they managed to squeeze Morgan and Dwayne into Fear the Walking Dead, they can squeeze Rick into this one, I'm sure. But I don't know how I feel about that.
But these shows are also, I suppose, I guess they get a combination of people that are watching all of them and then just the ones that are only watching one and never saw The Walking Dead, right? Does it work in that way as well?
It might do, but if you read any reviews or anything on this on IMDb, it's all 1 stars. So you're thinking it's hardcore Walking Dead people slagging it off.
Yeah. But it's its own show, isn't it? So
it is its own show, and
its own terms, yeah.
I wouldn't write it off quite as easily as other people have. I think it's okay. I'm going to carry on with it. Yeah.
Sometimes the spin-offs can be better. Like this is a bit of a tangent, but or better or just as good. Like I always thought I was actually a big Buffy fan, and I always thought Angel was
good. Yeah, Angel was a good
really
spin-off.
Good. Yeah,
it can be done.
It can be done, and actually Angel grew into itself. Like at first it was doing crossovers more, and you were like, oh, look who this is that's just arrived in town. It's Oz from Buffy. Hello, Oz. How are you doing? Let's catch up. And then you're like, okay. But then eventually it got its own identity. It became a kind of often much darker show than Buffy, and it became its own thing and did some really bold stuff. So you totally forgot by the end that the two were wedded because they'd stopped doing the gratuitous crossovers. Yeah, it can happen. Well, yeah, it's worth giving everything a try, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah, I haven't watched any of those. What have I watched? We both watched Mindhunter.
Mindhunter was great, wasn't it?
Fantastic.
I got stupidly into that very quickly. You kind of mentioned it. I was like, okay, I'll give it a go. And I started watching the first couple of episodes. I was like, I'm not sure I'm really getting into this. And then all of a sudden, I think by about the 3rd or 4th episode, I was like, oh, okay, I'm intrigued now. And when season 2 came along, that was it. I had to watch it like straight away, binge one after the other. It's
great. Yeah, absolutely. And it's a real shame because the future of it hangs in the balance, even though it left us wanting to see so much more. From what I gather from reading the stuff and the interviews is that David Fincher, it takes up a huge amount of time, and it's obvious because the show's really detailed.
It is, yeah.
The attention to detail is so strong, and David Fincher just doesn't have time, or I think there's an element of cost as well. I'm not convinced that,
and the stress of it as well. It sounded like it was hard work,
really intense. Yeah,
I'm not entirely sure. It's sad though because I would really like a 3rd season. Just another season would be great.
Yeah, I think so because the characters are really strong. The stories, there's no shortage of great places that can go, that show, and it leaves you wanting more so much of the time anyway. But
I like the way they changed your opinions of people because we were all for I've forgotten his name. Who's the younger guy?
Holden.
That's it, Holden. You were all for him. Like through season 1, he was a wholesome, well-rounded person, and then by season 2 he's all starting to fall apart slightly and getting a little bit above himself and stuff.
Yeah,
and then you follow the other guy with his adopted son and stuff, and that's like heartbreaking. That is.
Oh, yeah, that's harrowing, wasn't it? Yeah, it's really good. It's not afraid to make them unsympathetic at times.
No.
And it also did that great thing of we've seen him portrayed so many times in horror movies especially, but they had Charles Manson as a character in this season. And I love the fact that, you know, you've got all these horror movies playing up to the big iconic figure of Charles Manson, and they portray him as just a bit of a dick and a bit of a
tiny little man,
shamster. Total kind of worthless knob, really. That didn't even murder the people that he arranged to have killed. So I like that. It robbed him of his, I suppose, his iconic status in a lot of ways. But the show is really smart generally, and the portrayal of the serial killers is very carefully and very cleverly done. Mindhunters, easily the best show probably the last couple of years that I've seen, but I haven't seen that much. You know. We should talk briefly before we go about one that we both watched to a degree, which got a lot of attention, good or bad, which was The Haunting of Bly Manor.
Ah, yes.
What were your thoughts on The Haunting of Bly Manor, which was a long-awaited follow-up to The Haunting of Hill House, Sarah?
Yeah, I'm on the slightly disappointed side of things, just mainly because I found one of the characters incredibly annoying. Can you guess who it might be?
Was it that delightful cook chap? He was very.
No, I love him.
He's nice, isn't he? Was he Owen? Is that his name? Yeah.
Yeah, and he was in iZombie as well, which was weird because I'm used to seeing him in iZombie as a kind of quirky mortician, forensic scientist type thing. So seeing him as a English gent cook type thing is a bit, did kind of throw me a little bit. But that wasn't him. It's that annoying little girl where everything is perfectly splendid. I think she said it like 5 times in a row. I was like, I can't watch this anymore. I have to stop now. But I do like the idea of it. Annoyingly, for me, the little girl ruins it for me.
Yes. Yeah, she is irritating, isn't she?
But there is some characters I do like. I do like the Scottish guy.
The bad boy.
The bad Scottish guy.
Yeah, he's very good.
He was Luke in Hill House, wasn't he?
Yes, yeah, there is some crossover, isn't there, of actors? Yeah, that's him.
But yeah, I'm still working my way through that one. I haven't got to the amazing episode yet because of the stupid little girl is just driving me insane. So I have to do it in very. Yeah, that's exactly what it reminds me of. It's awful, and the little boy is creepy and pervy and weird.
He is, yeah, and not necessarily in the way that he should be, because. There's a great version of the same story, more or less, which is The Innocents, which is one of the great British horror films, where the 2 kids have totally nailed what they should be from The Turn of the Screw, which is the short story. But the kids are grating, and a lot of it, especially Henry Thomas's Prince Charles impression as the is he the dad? No, he's the I've forgotten his character anyway, but Henry Thomas does a kind of Prince Charles style English accent, which is quite bad. But yeah, it seems to be like an American's idea of what English people look and sound like. Hence we have Perfectly Splendid.
Perfectly Splendid.
Oh, isn't it cute? No, it's not cute. She should be fed through a meat grinder, but she isn't. But the show has its moments. I mean, I thought it was not nearly as good as Hill House, but I did stay the course. And it is, I do hate people that say, oh, yeah, this show has 2 really shit seasons, but gets really good in season 3. However, this does have 7 episodes that are of kind of different quality, and it does have a great episode 8, which is almost the end. But episode 8, which fills in some backstory for one of the ghosts, in fact, the best of the ghosts, is really good and is really eerie and interesting and much better than most of what was before it, although I think there is 1 or 2 stronger episodes than the others. The ending of Bly Manor is one of those ones which I think was quite touching in a way, but I can see people finding it again a bit irritating or perhaps a bit sentimental. But it's a mixed bag for sure, that one. And I suppose sorry,
no, you're right, carry on.
I think Mike Flanagan had limited involvement in it. I think he directed one of them, but it was mostly, I guess because he's so busy, but it was mostly handed off to other people. So that may be a factor in why it's not as good, because I know with the Hill House, he directed all of them, as far as I remember. So, yeah, it's a cautious recommend, maybe.
Yeah, if you can put up with the horrendous English accents.
Yeah.
If you like those accents, you'll love it.
I love your accent. Yeah. There's a chance of that, of course. And it may, I think it's each their own, I suppose, but it's not nearly as spooky or even as kind of involving as Hill House was.
No. It's a different thing altogether. I do wonder why they try and lump things together just because it has a similar sounding name. They probably would have been best off trying not to associate it with it so much.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's getting a bit like that now, I suppose. It's that, cashing in, I guess, if that one did well. But presumably they'll do another one and it'll be totally unrelated. Actually, there is one clever thing about Bly Manor, which is, I think it's clever, or is it just dumb? I can't remember. But there's one particular accent which seems particularly ropey, but makes sense by the end. Yes, there's something that happens where you think, oh, I get it. That's why it sounded like that, sort of. So yeah.
Oh, it better not be that the little girl is actually Mary Poppins.
That's the twist, yeah. Full of sugar. Yep, she really is Sherry Bobbins. It's true. But yeah.
I'm trying to think of others. Oh, another series that we both saw, but we kind of both admitted that we've embarrassingly both kind of forgotten a lot of, is season 2 of The Boys.
Oh yeah, that was really good at the time.
Yeah, but unfortunately, the more we think about it, we're like, I can't actually really remember an awful lot that happened. I just remember some great Homelander moments and another new villain in the form of Stormfront.
She was great.
More backstory on a couple of the other characters that you don't hear a lot of in season 1, like Lamplighter. His episodes, I was like, oh, I love him.
Yes.
Some funny moments. With
the whale.
Yeah, the bit with the whale. Some really gory moments. Some really shocking moments with head exploding, kind of like Scanners style. Yeah, you can't quite get over. And then a random kind of X-Men type episode where there's a hospital of they're experimenting with Compound V on adults and stuff. Because in season 1, it's brought to life that you give it to people when they're babies and then they get superhuman powers. So they're now trying it on adults, and there's this kind of mental asylum full of all these crazy people where it's all gone wrong. And one of the guys has a massive anaconda dong.
Yes.
That goes around strangling people.
It's really bizarre, isn't it?
And yeah, it's all kind of flooding back to me now, and Homelander pushes his boy off a roof, and the C word is thrown around in various angles. Pretty much the same as season 1. And we're all looking forward to season 3 now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was great. Yeah, absolutely. And it does come back to you when you think about it. I think I watched it in quite quick succession. I had a little break in the middle, I think. But the first series definitely I watched really quickly, and it's really bold. Yeah, I mean, some of it, like you said, is really shocking. I mean, it does have, as it goes along, it has a bit more heart, I think, and there's some characters that maybe initially there wasn't really anybody to root for, but there is in the end. But I think it does also have one of the great characters of recent TV, which is Homelander, which is this kind of awful but fascinating and attractive kind of Patrick Bateman from American Psycho kind of thing about him.
Played He's so terrifying. Well by Anthony Starr as well. I love him. I love that guy. He is such a good actor.
It's a tremendous character, yeah. And you end up at times feeling almost sorry for him, but then he's such a hateful piece of work. Yeah. I think the whole thing is a brilliant takedown of, how America worships superheroes, and here it's entirely false. Everything about them is made up essentially, and they're largely bastards. I also like all the jokes. I mean, there's some real good jokes in there. I wish I could remember the name of there's a kind of sort of subplot where there's porno versions of, is it Translucent Invisible Pop or something?
Yeah. That was the bit. That was the Lamplighter edition, isn't it? When he's getting really upset and he's watching all these weird softcore porn episodes.
The porn spin-offs. And it is great. I mean, it's very relevant. I mean, there's a lot about kind of cancel culture in there. Our current obsession with people on Twitter finding offence from something from 10 years ago. All that stuff is built into these really clever scripts, and like you said, all the one-liners, and Billy the Butcher with Carl Urban's strange Australian Cockney accent, and best advice to a kid: don't be a cunt. It's just it's fragments, but it was great. I think it's got to be up there with the best shows at the moment.
Too right.
I watched it this year because you'd said about it, and I know it became a big talking point in the first half of the year at work and stuff. And I I was choosing actually between that and Doom Patrol, which a few people really like, but which is another revisionist superhero thing, which is quite gory, I think. But this one seemed to be the one that people were really talking about, and yeah, it was for sure one of the best.
There's been some good stuff.
Sure has,
Some
yeah.
very, very good stuff. The only other two I've been watching have been ones that I've mentioned previously, and that was Ratched. I don't know if you started on that yet.
Not yet, no. Ratchet's on my list.
Yep, very good. And Primal. I'm still really obsessed with the animated series about the caveman and the dinosaur. Really, really, really good fun. I recently noticed that they did kind of split it up. So half of the episodes were 2019, and then the recent episodes are the ones which I think I've seen were this year.
Wow, okay.
But
And
that's another.
Is that Netflix?
No, that was on Adult Swim on E4.
Oh, yes, okay.
Yeah, it's another gory animated thing with no dialogue whatsoever. You can figure it out. It's not hard to comprehend and stuff, but it's all about Spear, the caveman, and his dinosaur friend called Fang, going on loads of adventures trying to survive and killing many, many different things on their way, like crazy ape things, crocodiles, zombie dinosaurs, all that kind of stuff. It's really great fun.
Yeah, it's a good time for shows, isn't it? And
it really is.
I think we'll see a lot more of it. There's a lot of big name directors and horror people that are going into shows. More creep shows coming, of course, and
yeah,
I'm sure that will lead to loads of other stuff as well. Well, that was it. I think that was the year. It flew by.
It flew by, absolutely, and we can only hope that things get a little bit better next year. But in the meantime, we've still got Christmas to get through. And do you have any festive horror movies that you like to watch over Christmas, Stephen?
Yeah, I suppose there's a few. I mean, I haven't yet watched it, but Gremlins is my all-time favourite Christmas horror movie, or Christmas movie, actually. Yeah. There's nothing better than Gremlins. Gremlins is brilliant. And Gremlins is really, really kind of dark. It's right up our street. It's a monster movie. And there's a lot of dark stuff that happens in Gremlins, especially the why I don't celebrate Christmas speech because my dad fell down the chimney and broke his neck bit, which is one of the great sick jokes in Hollywood films. I like the proper Black Christmas is really creepy. I always like that one. Tales from the Crypt, the Killer Santa bit in that is still awesome. In both, it was really good in the film, but it's also really good in the TV series of Tales from the Crypt, which is awesome. I'm sure there's some others, actually. Christmas Evil, we mentioned, is really clever. A really creepy one is The Children, which is set at Christmas. About those kids that fall victim to that weird virus, which sort of zombies from memory. Any others that I'm missing? Any obvious ones?
There's some obvious, quite recent ones for me. Ones that I go to that have been out in the last few years. Better Watch Out.
That's great. Yeah.
Really, really good. Clever. I consider it a kind of alternative to Home Alone.
Complete with the paint cans.
Yeah, exactly. Paint cans and all sorts. Just a really grim, sick version of Home Alone.
Right. Yeah, I like that one. That's
and of course, Anna and the Apocalypse.
Anna and the Apocalypse. How could I forget that? That's one of the greats. I love Anna and the Apocalypse. That's truly nailed it. Musical, comedy, zombie,
Christmas.
Tragic.
Who the
Paul
hell?
Kay.
Yeah. Love Paul Kay.
What about Krampus? I love Krampus. That's terrific.
That's on Netflix at the moment. I started watching it the other day, and I went to see that at the cinema when it came out, and I'd actually forgotten a lot about the beginning with the whole family and the hideous cousins and the poor little kid who gets his note read out in front of everyone. He gets really embarrassed.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like, right. Yes, that is a good one. And another one that's on, I think this is on Shudder, funnily enough. It's one that I rewatched the other day, A Christmas Horror Story from 2015.
Yes, that's good.
I'd forgotten about that one. It's another one of those ones where I saw the name and I was like, it rings a bell, but I really don't remember it. And as soon as I started watching it, I was like, oh, yes, I remember it now. It has zombie elves. It's kind of split into 4 bits, isn't it? And all kind of horror or Christmas related. But with a horror twist, you have a bunch of kids locked in a school, doing a kind of found footage Blair Witch type thing on a ghost that had been to the school the year before and killed some students. You have the creepy changeling bit where the family lose their kid in the woods when they're trying to get their Christmas tree and end up taking someone else home with them.
Yeah, that's sinister, isn't it? I like that one.
Yeah, and then you have the Krampus story with the hideous rich family that go to visit their aunt, and the horrendous kid like breaks a Krampus model, and they start then getting hunted by Krampus, and then the whole thing's kind of topped off with Santa Claus getting ready to go, but his elves all get infected with the virus and come back to kill him, and he has to go and slay all his elves and stuff. It's really good. That's a good one.
Yeah, I'd forgotten actually how good that is now you've gone over the stories, because I remember the elves and I'd sort of remember the changeling one, but that's really fun.
There is a lot out there, and of course, like the ones you mentioned, Gremlins and all sorts, is just the best Christmas thing to keep revisiting. I like all the memes that are coming out on Facebook and stuff at the moment about the way the year's gone, and there's someone holding a gizmo under a tap, going, "It's 2020. What could go wrong?"
Oh yeah, there's some great. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Ye gods. Well, the good news is as we speak, there's only a few days left, so obviously it'll be a total reset on January the 1st, and everything will be all right, hopefully. We shall return actually in 2021 with a talk about the REC films. Yes. REC, the Spanish wonderful. Well, they appear to be zombie films, but are they really?
But are they? Yeah. We should be discussing that.
We're doing a lot of chin stroking and talking about them. All four of them. There's four of them, and at least a couple of them I would put in the kind of recent classics category. So I think it's a rare franchise that did do at least 3 good films.
Yes.
We'll be available for the REC episode in the new year via YouTube and selected podcast providers. So do check us out. We'll post some previews of that when the time comes. But other than that, if you're listening to this, congratulations, you survived 2020, as did we, up until the 20th of December is the disclaimer there. And obviously, carry on looking after yourselves and have a very happy Christmas. Anything else to say, Sarah, before we wander into the night?
No, I think that is it. Just, everybody else have a really, really good Christmas, and we'll see you all in the new year.
Yeah, thanks for listening. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.